looking at you, kid.
I'm Charles Foster Kane!
Hey, Stella!
Suck on this.
What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here. Today, it is my pleasure to welcome Martin Kessler back to the channel, and in honor of the upcoming release of Alien Romulus, we're going to embark on an epic deep dive into the entire timeline of the Alien franchise, but we're going to make it a little weird by doing so chronologically, not in the order that the movies, comics, and games came out, but instead in the order in which they fall on the increasingly complex timeline that has been slowly taking shape since Ridley Scott first unleashed Alien back in 1979, which by the way was the year 2122 in the fictional setting of this franchise. Now, I won't claim to have read every novel or comic or played every game, and we're very well aware that some of these comics and movies have been, decanonized or just wiped clean by subsequent entries. But for this video, it's all fair game, and hopefully between me and Martin, you'll get some juicy recommendations for further adventures within this unique entertainment franchise. But with all that out of the way, Mr. Kessler, how the hell are you, and what have you been doing with yourself since we tackled Godzilla earlier this year?
That's right. Been doing pretty well. I've been podcasting over on the Pink Smoke. I've got some stuff upcoming, and I've been enjoying York Borg with you.
York Borg!
It's been
anytime you say it, you have
blast.
to say it like Moose Matson. I need to get a clip of him with a Viking helmet just screaming it so that we can just play that clip every time it comes up. But for people who don't know what York Borg is, it is a tabletop RPG with it's a rules light system, but it's heavy on atmosphere and gallows humor and crazy things happening to your characters that makes everybody laugh as your stomach decides to crawl out of your mouth and slap you in the face and all sorts of weird, strange, unpredictable things that might go down. But speaking of tabletop RPGs, they will be coming up later in the broadcast.
That's true. And
well,
it's always nice to be talking with a fellow Fiore 161 inmate. So it's great to be here.
Fantastic. Well, I'm noticing a new angle from what I'm used to when whether we're playing D&D or recording. Are you about to embark upon your own YouTube empire now that you've got all your gear and physical media beautifully framed behind you?
I've thought about it. I've actually got another YouTube channel that I haven't really posted anything on yet, but I was thinking of doing stuff about collectibles, maybe make some videos showing off some of the collectible things that I have and reviewing them and discussing.
Do you ever watch unboxing videos?
I watch review videos that sometimes have unboxings in them.
But, do you get any visceral thrills from that, or you're like, this is trash, like don't give me this content anymore?
I mean, I enjoy unboxing stuff myself, but just because you get that whiff of the PVC smell,
yeah,
like that's the good stuff. That's the hit. I mean,
I just remember 5 or 6 years ago, I saw a list of the top 10 earners on YouTube, and one of them was a 7 or 8 year old child where every day his parents just bring him presents and they record him going, whoa, opening them up. And he was getting millions of clicks every day. I was like, this is bullshit. This is such fucking garbage. It's just vapid nonsense, but just obviously fulfilling a need that some people have by giving him a lift by just watching the joy of this child as he smells all those fumes coming out of the box. But yeah, I am not an unboxing enthusiast, but I'm more than happy to let people promote all their physical media and toys and whatnot on the channel when it's in the context of the conversation. Well, what else can we get into before we just dive right in? Because I feel like of all the franchises out there, there's a strong case to be made that this is the best science fiction franchise ever, not because it's been so consistent, but any franchise that has 2 of the best science fiction movies ever made in that same franchise. I regard Alien and Aliens as best in class for what they're trying to do with that type of storytelling, where you can just see dozens, if not hundreds of movies and shows that have been trying to kind of copy their style ever since. And I almost feel like we're due for another seismic shift in science fiction, just so we can start getting some new styles and aesthetics. But those movies have been that influential. And over the last few weeks, I revisited all 8 movies that currently exist, and they're all available on Hulu, I think. And it's amazing how well so many of them hold up. And admittedly, the first 4 movies that came out chronologically are always going to be nearest and dearest to my heart because I was young when I saw them and I first got exposed to them. But goddamn, Alien and Aliens, I feel like if anything, they've grown over the years. And I think I'm finally prepared to say that Alien from 1979 is my favorite science fiction film.
I think it's mine as well. I mean, this is a series that's really close to my own heart. These were the films that really made me interested in filmmaking. Watching Alien as a little kid, I was like people made this. How do you make that? And fortunately, the Alien films all have really great behind the scenes videos and things. Even before like the DVD era, I remember picking up that big VHS box set with the silver alien on the side. And
Totally.
Probably more than the first film, I watched the making of video, the 5th VHS tape that kind of came with it, where they discussed the making of it. And as a kid, it was so interesting. Like, movies have somebody write it, and there can be more than one person that writes it. And movies have directors and producers, and there's people who design things. And, there's all these different creative people involved in bringing it to life. And I think that was really eye-opening for me and kind of set me on this path of loving film, making film, discussing film, all that stuff.
How many Alien action figures do you have in your collection? Because I'm seeing a few figures over your left shoulder. You're busted, so I know you've got an Alien toy somewhere in your library.
No, you know what? I had a big Alien toy and I sold it. I actually don't think I have an Alien right now. Believe it or not, I've got a giant Predator though. How's that?
That works.
I've got Godzilla. I've got a Predator. I've got Star Wars toys.
When are we going to see Predator versus Godzilla? And I guess I know that you're a Predator enthusiast. How many Predators would it take to kill the Godzilla that we saw in Godzilla -1?
Oh, in Godzilla -1?
Yeah, because they're different Godzillas at different shapes and sizes and strength,
that one regenerates, which makes it kind of tricky. But
if you were to guess, off the top of your head, how many Predators would it take to take that fucker down?
Just one.
Because 50 or 60 humans managed to take him down. So if 50 or 60 humans can do it, then clearly, a handful of Predators could probably pull it off.
Just one Predator, but he's got to have a grudge.
Gotcha. Fair enough. The way I always look at it is in these movies, if a couple of humans can kill one alien, but then one Predator can kill a couple of trained humans, and then if you have a bunch of trained humans that can in turn kill many aliens, it kind of helps you do your combat math. Therefore, how many Predators should it take to kill an army of aliens? And from my point of view, if 5 humans or 6 humans can kill one alien, then one Predator should be able to take out, at least 10 or 20 aliens. But it all depends upon which franchise you're more loyal to. But when I see one Predator taking out everybody in that first film, I'm like, all right, well, those guys probably could have killed 50 aliens if they'd been the cast of Aliens. And so that's the way that kind of my nerdy math brain works.
Have you seen those YouTube videos where it's 10,000 zombies against 50 Jedi, and it's some weird simulation where they
Well, my favorite is how many 5-year-old children can you beat? It judged based on your height and your weight and your level of fitness. How tired? At what point does an army of an endless army of 5-year-old children overwhelm you and eventually pull you down and just devour you and eat you? I'd like to think I could kill a couple hundred 5-year-olds before they finally drag me down by their superior numbers. But while we're getting weird on the subject of strange crossovers, let's just dive right in where we have the only movie in the franchise where the year in which it was released is the same year in which the movie takes place, and that is Alien versus Predator from 2004. And I should warn everybody, Martin has a lot of clips, I have a lot of clips, so we're just gonna bombard you with clips. But here is our first clip, ready to rock. And not all the clips are equally loud or equally quiet. So I should warn you, if you're wearing AirPods, don't have the volume cranked up too loud, because they're definitely screams and gunshots and just all sorts of hellfire and damnation scattered throughout. So I apologize that we didn't get the sound completely even, but Martin and I were working independently. So I know you're a Predator fan. I know you're an Alien fan. Do you have divided loyalties with Alien versus Predator? Or just give me the spiel. You and I have never discussed it in all of our days. We've discussed the other two franchises many times, but Alien versus Predator is virgin territory.
Well, in Alien versus Predator, it kind of puts the Predator in the more heroic role. So you're supposed to root for the Predator, I think. It's like when you watch, what was it? Godzilla versus King Kong. You're kind of rooting for King Kong just because of the way the story is structured. But Alien versus Predator, for me, it's the two great tastes that taste great together. Like you can't go wrong. It's there was so much anticipation for it too. Maybe not outside of my little nerd sphere, but
yeah, it wasn't
it was
Batman
like
v
for
Superman
years.
anticipation, but it was highly anticipated because we'd had at that point like 25 years of really
Yeah.
good science fiction movies with both
Well,
franchises.
and just knowing that there was a possibility that you could see them together. I think from Predator 2, where you get that little, it's mostly just a joke, but that kind of tease with the trophy wall where you see
Totally.
the alien skull, and then the Dark Horse comics came out, and it's like, oh, this could be a thing. You sort of instantly get excited about the possibilities, and there are all these different comic stories. The video games too. I remember I loved the Alien versus Predator side-scrolling arcade game. It was like in a mall, and I used to play it, and I got so upset when they took the arcade machine away.
Gotcha.
But
like you're the only one who plays it, and you don't have any quarters to keep it going.
I mean, there's been a couple things like that in my life. I remember, we talked about Split Second before. I remember renting it from the video store. It was probably like the 10th time I was renting it. They were like, just keep it.
Yeah.
Like I was the only one probably.
It's gathering dust. It is our gift to you. But I saw Split Second in the theater, so you're not alone in your enthusiasm for Split Second. But for people who may have missed Alien versus Predator, perhaps even deliberately, because it's notoriously, I think it's the only PG-13 entry in the whole franchise. I might have been wrong. This one is definitely PG-13. Make the pitch. Who directed it? When does it take place? And how does it find a way to bring the Alien and the Predator together at the unusual year of 2004, a franchise which a lot of people think, oh, Alien, it took place in 2122. Yeah. How is this a thing?
Okay, it's directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, who probably people best know for the Resident Evil movies,
Mortal Kombat.
And Mortal Kombat, of course. He's a video game movie director. And I sort of think of Alien versus Predator as, even though it was an established film franchise, you're looking more at the comic books, you're looking more at the video games. There's the really great PC games where you can play as the alien or predator or human. So I kind of think of Alien versus Predator as being more of a video game movie, and that kind of segregates it a little bit from the other Alien or Predator films in my mind. But, the basic story is that humans discover this ancient pyramid in Antarctica, and Charles Wayland. I got to get my Wayland straight. There's more than one.
There's more than one Wayland, but Wayland is a name that will come up with every single movie or show or comic or game that we discuss.
Lance Henriksen Wayland wants to go investigate. It turns out that predators have been using humans as hosts to raise aliens to give them something to hunt, and it's like this prized trophy, probably for thousands of years. It's got a little bit of that Ancient Aliens vibe to it. And
I know you're a bit of a South American ancient civilization buff. Did you get off on the idea of like the pyramids and the ritualistic sacrifice and like humans being, implanted with the embryos and that sort of thing?
Of course I did. I mean, I love that flashback sequence too, where you just see the predators fighting on top of this pyramid, and the aliens are swarming them like thousands of aliens, and they, there's no way out, and they self-destruct. I think
it's the best part of the movie.
I'm a sucker for that stuff.
Yeah.
But I like the whole...
I feel like the numbers there make sense. Like a handful of predators standing back to back with all their weapons probably could keep a host of aliens or xenomorphs at bay for a time before they inevitably got overwhelmed.
I mean, in Alien versus Predator, they kind of keep the balance of aliens to predator in terms of kills by having the predators not get their guns right away. The little plasma bolt things they have to pick up in the pyramid. The pyramid too, it's kind of like it's a knockoff of Vincenzo Natali's Cube, where it's like shifting and moving, and I love that.
That's actually my least favorite part of the movie, because I feel like if something's old, it shouldn't feel quite so new and functional.
Technological. I guess so, but I just like the kind of strangeness of this moving.
But I love Cube.
Like, it's very
Cube rules.
Again, it's very like video gamey, but I like that stuff. Cinda Lathan is kind of the Sigourney Weaver of the movie. She's the Ripley of the movie. There's a lot of kind of Ripley type characters, these sort of aloof, capable women.
Every single one has a girl with more or less short hair, where at some point she's going to wear a white t-shirt or a tank top, and she's going to whip out a gun. It's like, that is the alien look. And it's everything. I guarantee you Romulus will do the exact same shit.
I think like just Ripley as a character is so ingrained in pop culture that it's hard to think of doing an alien film without having a character like that. But one thing I like about Alien versus Predator is the whole team up aspect between the Predator and the human, because you've only seen Predators fight humans, but they're intelligent, they're similar. That like, you know, I love the scene where they're just communicating and it does the little hand gesture and she goes, oh, like it's a bomb, you know, and the way they kind of have to communicate without having a language. There's even, I don't know if anyone agrees with me, but I think there's even like some romantic tension, some sexual tension between her and the Predator.
Maybe
there's
so.
One moment where I swear,
do you have a clip that kind of
let's play the
that's when like
clip.
Now Kith or the one that
yeah.
All right, here we go. I mean, I'm turned on. I don't know about you, but I'm ready. I think I'm ready to fuck a Predator.
I swear to God, when I saw it in the theater, you could hear a pin drop, and I feel like everyone was waiting. Like, wait, are they going to kiss?
Mandibles.
Like, everyone was just waiting. Like, wait, what's about to happen here? Because at that point in the story, you think the aliens are all dead, and it's just the two of them standing there, and it's like, wait, what happens now?
Absolutely.
But of course, the queen alien cock blocks the Predator, and you get that pretty great climactic final fight. I love. There's also a great kind of moment where the Predator comes to the rescue and pokes the queen in the head. I always love that visual. And
I've got that clip ready to rock as well.
So I get that Alien versus Predator maybe doesn't have the best reputation if you're coming off of, you know, we're talking about some of the greatest science fiction films ever made, but like, you know, if you're somebody who's into the comic books, if you're somebody who's into the video games, I just think that's so cool. I can't help myself.
Equivalent of a lot of the Universal monster movie crossovers of the late 30s, early 40s, where it's like, all right, well, we've done the Wolfman, we've done Frankenstein, we've done Dracula, and we've done the Mummy. Well, shit, I guess now they have to fight. And so the same thing happened here. It's like, all right, we have these incredibly popular monsters that are relatively new. Let's let them fight. And, you know, I mean, if I were to criticize that, I would say the PG-13's no bueno. It is very well lit, which sometimes ruins some of the atmosphere, but it's totally watchable. I don't know if I hold Paul W.S. Anderson in the same regard as you do, because I think you might be the world's most foremost defender of his filmography.
Yeah.
But I totally get why this one at least was popular enough to justify at least one sequel.
Yeah, it's a good one to just pop in whenever I'm in the right mood and just want to watch a real popcorn flick. And like a lot of the elements do come from the comics, like the whole idea of a woman kind of joining the Predator culture. Like that's Machiko from the comics. And there's even some of the books. I've got Alien versus Predator books here. You know, there's this character.
So that novelization, the Alien versus Predator, did it precede the film?
Yep. So, you know, you already had this idea of a woman kind of becoming part of the Predator culture. It's in the comics too. So there's just a lot of things where if you follow the books and comics, I don't know why my cam got all dark all of a sudden.
Yeah, so maybe it's time we should move on to.
No, my lights are still here. That's probably a sign we got to move on to Alien vs. Predator Requiem.
It's a perfect visual cue for a movie that's been heavily criticized for being overly dark. And it's almost like your computer's listening to, like, if we're going to talk about Alien VPR, well, then we got to get dark. But before we move on, though, one bit of trivia which I found interesting from Alien vs. Predator. With the filming of this movie, Lance Henriksen became the second actor to be killed by an alien, a predator, and a Terminator. Who was the first?
It's got to be Bill Paxton.
Boom! Look at you.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm trying to think if anyone else is close. There's got to be at least one other. Who might need an alien?
Some people debate it because they say that Bill Paxton wasn't killed by the Terminator. Maybe he was only punched by the Terminator. But
he's only punched to death. I mean,
yeah. And also Henriksen's death in Terminator is never confirmed, but you can assume
also his death
Terminator wipes out the entire police station.
Yeah. Also his death in Alien 3. It's like
he gets unplugged. Yeah.
He gets unplugged, although it's as a consequence of the Queen Alien ripping off. Now I'm too bright. But
Yeah, now you've gone full Paul W.S. Anderson, which
all
works.
right, well,
Like I said, you're the world's foremost fan. It's like you're lit from within, imbued with some sort of special power. But let's move on to, I think, what might be my least favorite movie of all the movies that have been made so far: Alien versus Predator, Requiem, 2007, also set in 2004, because it picks up right where Alien versus Predator left off. And for people who have not been subjected to the unique allure of this movie, what is the biggest source of controversy at the core of this? That's kind of, I guess for me, I hate the suburban setting, but even worse is the so-called
Predalien. Well, the Predalien, this is kind of a weird thing that also came from the comics. I think the first appearance was in Alien versus Predator Duel, which it's kind of neat as a novelty, because in the comics, they kind of took this idea from Alien 3 that the alien, it like comes out of a dog, so it's got dog traits.
From. Yeah.
And like the action figures really ran with that, where you've got mantis aliens and rhino aliens and stuff like that. And, of course, if you have Alien versus Predator comics, the question comes up, well, what does an alien look like that comes out of a predator?
Yeah. What happens when they
exactly?
When they
and it shows up in the video games, and it's supposed to be like, meaner and tougher than the regular aliens. You're supposed to dread whenever Predalien shows up. But the thing I never liked about the design is that the Predalien has dreadlocks, or the hair. I'm like, the alien doesn't have human hair. Or they don't have like.
It's biological. I guess they're trying to make it like it's a biological thing, where I look at the predators more as like it's like an affectation or style that
exactly
they're designing their hair that way. It's not like they come out of the womb with dreadlocks.
So I never really liked that visual element in the Predalien, which you see over and over and over again. That's just like how it looks in the comics or games or in this movie. I don't mind the idea, though, that's like alien with mandibles that's kind of bigger and tougher. Like, I think that's kind of neat.
That I can live with. What I dislike is how it changes the whole reproductive cycle. And I think one of the the crowning achievements of the whole Alien franchise is inventing this idea of going from the egg to the face hugger to the embryo to like the tiny xenomorph coming out of you, growing very quickly. And maybe some of them might become a queen under certain circumstances. But like that whole elaborate life cycle and like their ability to withstand hostile environments, so they can just lie waiting for maybe thousands of years for the next victim. But they changed the whole life cycle to where the Predalien can now implant like embryos through its mouth. And I have a gross little clip, so brace yourself. I mean, that's the sight of the multiple eggs going down the throat. And then later on, like 10 of them burst out of her at once. It's ridiculous.
I mean, the movie's schlock.
Yeah.
Like that's just the word for it. It's schlock.
Nothing wrong with schlock. But is it good schlock or bad schlock?
Like, I think if people just want Alien Predator schlock, there's people I know who like this movie. But for me, this is like the bottom of the barrel. This is like what these movies should not be, because people... if you go back to the first one, what
cut of part 2 of Rebel Moons, like the last man standing. It's like, I still like sex stuff.
I haven't seen it, but the Alien movies, to me, part of the idea was like, how do we elevate this above schlock? We're dealing with kind of schlocky material, and it's always interesting to me when you get a story or a concept that like lends itself to being schlock, but people work hard to make it, more refined, more artistic, more entertaining, more
the first Alien could have been schlock. If it had been made 10 years earlier, it might have been a very different movie.
They talked about maybe it was going to be a Roger Corman movie. It's like it could have been just another piece of schlock.
And instead it becomes high art just because of the craftsmanship. They just elevated from the writing to the production design to the concept art to the astonishing ensemble cast. You can take a schlocky premise, bunch of truck drivers in space, find a bunch of eggs, one attaches it to its face, and all hell breaks loose. In the hands of another director, it would have been quite a different experience.
And the setting, I don't like at all either, the small town setting, because to me, the Alien films and also the Predator films, the environment plays such a big role in, it's a cliche to say,
Unless
but like,
it's a
the
slasher movie,
setting is
stay out of the
is a
suburbs.
character in these movies. The Alien films, particularly, like, you have these very constructed worlds that you feel immersed in. And, Alien versus Predator Requiem, it kind of feels like it's just a cost cutting measure. Like, let's set it in a small suburban town. I mean, one of the Predator films does that also, I think the Shane Black one, which is pretty bad. But I think you can kind of trace that with Alien films back to...
Was that Predators or just Predator? They just call it Predator. I can't remember. I only saw the Shane Black one once.
Is there a...
I think there's an Adrian Brody Predators, and then
that's
they went
Predators.
back to,
we talked about this before. I think it's the Predator. Yeah, which I hate that whole era when like reboots and sequels and things were just called like, oh, we're doing a Thing prequel. It's also called The Thing.
Yeah.
I don't know why that was a moment, but I think you can kind of trace the small town elements back to when Rennie Harlin was working on Alien 3, kind of before it morphed into what it was. One of the possible ideas, I think, when Eric Red was working on it, they were discussing maybe having it setting it in a small town, or eventually, like, I think they kind of landed on this idea of like, oh, we'll set it on a space station that's got this like biodome that's inside like a small town America. But I just never really was attracted to that idea. I think some of the comics have kind of played around with that stuff, but
what they should have done, and I know this was considered at one point, but they should have gone back to LA and with all the survivors of Predator 2, merged the Alien VP franchise with the Predator franchise and given us like the ultimate crossover. Like Danny Glover was still young enough to pull it off, and so I wouldn't have minded a return to that world. But yeah, the suburbs do not work for me. But another source of criticism has been the lighting, because Alien V versus Predator was criticized for being too bright, so they overcompensated with this by making it too dark. And you sent me a clip, which might be the most hilarious example.
This is from like the climactic final fight. This is supposed to be like the, and I get the idea of like, you want to hide your special effects in shadow. Yeah, no, like I saw this in the theater. Only God can judge me. But when I was watching the movie, I was like, oh, the projector bulb's dying.
Yeah.
Should I go and let them know that the projector is dying watching this movie? And it wasn't really until like I saw it on DVD after where I'm like, oh, that's how that movie looks. Yeah. And there's that, that famous behind the scenes clip of them on set where, there's not enough light, just yelling.
Well, speaking of which, here it is. I mean, I'm all for a little shadow play, creating enough of a sense of the unknown where your imagination starts filling in the gaps. Like there's that great scene in Vincent Minnelli's Bad and the Beautiful from the 50s when Kirk Douglas turns off the lights except for that one lamp. And he's like, things come to life in the dark and blah, 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 blah. Like your mind will fill in the most horrible thing, but you have to be able to see some of it so that your mind will kind of fill in the rest of the empty space. But if it's all just darkness, it's like, well, I can't see shit. Like you give me 25% of the screen from like, maybe like a headlight from a car or something like that, just so we have some idea of like what the hell's going down.
I think, film, if you really want to create that mood, it's light and shadow, and you need the light part to have the dark part. Yeah. It's in the contrast. It's, you think about the German expressionism, you think about Val Lewton. It's, those films, you can see what's going on and it knows what to hide in the shadow and what you can see. And I think the film just kind of makes that mistake of like, oh, we got to hide it all in darkness. And it like visually it's hideous. I think it's like borderline unwatchable. I'm shocked that there are people who like actually kind of champion this movie, but I don't judge them. Like you can like whatever you like. You can like a pretty alien pumping eggs down a pregnant woman's throat. That's fine.
Well, I got a question for you. Like, if this is as bad as it gets, which is still watchable, is Alien the most consistent pop culture franchise of the last half century in terms of maintaining a certain level of quality? Because maybe from like the late 60s to the mid 90s, I would have said Star Trek, but recent years have kind of altered my perception. But I might be inclined to say that if you compare it like to Star Wars, to Star Trek, to I guess Terminator, but like I feel like the Alien franchise has at least, like I said, two classics, a couple of movies that are pretty good, as well as all this other shit. Like maybe it might be the most consistently entertaining sci-fi franchise of the last half century.
I mean, if you count it as sci-fi, I would probably, if you asked me a couple months ago, I would have said the Mad Max franchise. But now I might have retracted that a little bit since Furiosa came out, and I was kind of.
I liked Furiosa quite a bit, but it was a tad on the long side.
It's okay. But
just for a quick diversion, how do you rank the 5 Mad Max movies?
It's really tough because I think Fury Road is probably my favorite, but there's like one or two things from like Road Warrior's got the better third act. I think like as exciting as Fury Road is, like the stuff that's really interesting to me is the dynamic between Max and Furiosa and them kind of learning to work together. How much can they trust each other, feeling it out. And that last big kind of climactic battle, it's the most visually spectacular, but it's got the least going on emotionally versus like Road Warrior, where, you have that whole added element of like, oh, did Max even know that he was the decoy? And I think like also
you get the extreme close-ups between the feral child and Wes, and it's like,
yeah,
I mean, all that stuff is
like that stuff is like pitch perfect. And like, Mel Gibson, I get why they didn't bring him back for Fury Road. I'm fine with it, but also like Tom Hardy's great. Mel Gibson was Mad Max. He was just like a lunatic man from the post-apocalypse, So I think like, for all his faults, like you can't really ever have a better Mad Max than that. So like there's things that I think kind of put Road Warrior above it for me, but also there are things that put Fury.
So what's your least favorite Mad Max? Is it Furiosa or?
Yeah, it's Furiosa.
Gotcha.
Beyond Thunderdome. You know what? Like Beyond Thunderdome, I always liked it. It's funny that people kind of gave it a hard time, like, oh, it was good until the kids showed up.
That's what I always say.
Kids are the best part of the movie now. Like the worst part for me is when they try to do like Road Warrior again, but worse.
Gotcha. Like, at the very end.
Yeah, I'm like,
yeah, I like the first third of Beyond Thunderdome, and the rest I can kind of live without.
Yeah, no, I like all the stuff with the kids, kind of like with their own mythology, and you even see that one kid with the skull makeup who's kind of like the precursor to the War Boys and Fury Road. Thunderdome's cool. I like it.
Well, getting back to Alien, both these Alien flicks, Alien versus Predator and Alien versus Predator Requiem, have been quote unquote decanonized, wiped from the slate, blah, blah, blah. But my attitude is the movies were made and they had the word alien in the title and they have xenomorphs. So we had to discuss them no matter what people might think in terms of their own personal headcanon and that sort of thing. But before we get to kind of the official beginning of the continuity, we do have a TV series coming from Noah Hawley, who did Legion, and he also did, I think, all the seasons of Fargo. But he's got an alien show that is set a few years before Prometheus, which is set in 2093, and it's set like 30 years before the 1979 Alien movie. What are your thoughts on the Alien TV series? Hotly anticipated, not anticipated? Any strong feelings about Noah Hawley and what he might do with it?
No, I got no strong feelings. Sorry. I think like Alien, it's the kind of story I can't really imagine it working super well in long form television. I think Alien movies, they're typically slow burns, but if you try to stretch it out to like 8 hours or something like that, I don't know, maybe it'll be okay, but I kind of feel like just not super interested in whatever that's going to be. Maybe it'll be cool, but
yeah, it feels like a franchise extension. Like if Disney owns the rights to something, sooner or later, they're going to give the green light to somebody making a show or a movie. And so it's like they're coming no matter what. And it's just like, to what degree will these attempts be successful? And I'll say this, Fargo season 1 and 2, I fucking loved. Legion season 2, I like 3 less so. He's got some chops, but he also is one of those guys where I feel like sometimes he's a tube running from his anus right to his nose, where he loves the smell of his own farts, and he's surrounded by yes men telling him that he's a genius all the time, which is never healthy for anybody. But although if people want to leave a comment, say that I'm a genius, I won't contradict them, but I will check it out just because Noah Hawley has entertained me in the past. I don't know if his sensibility or style will lend itself to Alien really well, but once again, it all depends on what do you want from your Alien franchise.
Yeah. So who knows? Who knows what that'll be? I'm not particularly excited for it, but could be something.
Okay, well, let's get into what might be the first real source of
Okay.
controversy within the alien community, Prometheus from 2012, which is set in 2093. And I think I've got a little taste of the trail. No, I didn't. Actually, I didn't.
Okay.
Scratch what I just said. I've got different clips. I got two from you and one from me, but they're not from the trailer. So we'll get to the clip.
That trailer was hype. Like
It
I
was.
remember.
It was. I hate using the word hype, but it was fucking
But it
hype
was.
when it came out. It was a really good trailer that set expectations up in the stratosphere because it echoed a lot of the styles, a lot of the kind of like, I guess, the tropes used in the original Alien trailer, which I actually do have a copy of. So here's a little taste of the Alien trailer from 1979, where it was kind of echoed in the Prometheus trailer.
Best movie trailer of all time.
I have no problem with that. As long as you include also maybe the best movie poster of all time. Like in terms of marketing, it is the heavyweight champion, the GOAT. It will always be the GOAT of great poster, great trailer. And then you got a really good fucking movie, perfect storm. But getting back to Prometheus, when that trailer came out, it was like, oh my God, Ridley Scott's coming back to the franchise. Like Alien's going to be back, blah, blah, blah. I will admit, I saw it twice in the theater, once on my own, and another time I dragged my little brother, who hates science fiction and hates horror movies, but I made him see it, and he was like convulsing and freaking out the whole time. I was like, quit being a pussy, blah, 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 blah. But here we are, more than 10 years later. We've had a chance to digest, process, assess, etc. What are your feelings on Prometheus?
It's funny that you mentioned seeing it twice. I saw it twice too, but the reason I saw it a second time was like, wait, did I really not like that? But I honestly, I'm forgiving of Prometheus, especially kind of seeing what comes immediately after it. But I think it's a film that has an ambition that exceeds its grasp, which maybe is appropriate for the kind of film that it is, the themes it's dealing with. I think like it's a film that wants to be smart. It's a film that wants to grapple with big ideas, and I kind of like the idea of it becoming sort of a tangential franchise to Alien, that it's, even though it's framed as a prequel, and now it's definitely a prequel when you kind of lead right into Alien Covenant after, but I liked the idea of, for a moment, of like, oh, this could kind of be a branching franchise where it has it's a cousin to Alien. It's not a prequel to Alien. But
I think both this and Covenant would have been stronger if they just left the xenomorphs out of it entirely. Like, don't throw in that fan service. Really embrace this different direction of the engineers and all these horrible weapons that they've been developing, and then using them on them. Like, lean all the way into that and let Alien. Because I feel like if you look at the first 4 Alien movies, they all branch off and stem forth from that one ship that's landing on that one planet with that one cache of eggs that's down the bottom. And it's not like they encounter any like additional sources of eggs or other spaceships. It all comes from that one really mysterious situation where no one really knows how that ship got there or why it was carrying all those eggs. And that's what made it so fascinating. So my one big criticism of Prometheus and Covenant is that it seeks to answer questions that reduce the mystery and the vibe of the first half of Alien, because the first half of Alien is basically the world's greatest haunted house story set in space. And as I've gotten older, I like the first half of Alien more than the second half. Whereas when I was a kid, I liked the second half. But when I was a kid, I was like, first half so boring, nothing happens.
No, because the first half is so full of mystery, and you wonder like how did that spaceship get there? What went wrong? Like Prometheus.
Why did the navigator have an egg? Like, did they escape? Or was he betrayed? Like, they give you none of the answers. And that's why for decades we're debating and discussing and excited.
Prometheus, I don't even really let it affect the way I watch Alien. Prometheus, I watch it and I'm almost like, oh, that's an interesting theory of what could have been the explanation for Alien. But when I watch Alien, it kind of goes right out of my mind, and I have my own ideas and my own theories.
So give the hook, set it up. What for people who have forgotten on purpose or not? Like, there are some scenes in Prometheus that I love, like shots of them coming and landing on the planet, or just majestic and beautiful. I love the ensemble cast. Like, there are a lot of things that I like. And then as it the further along it goes, I feel like the increasingly stupid it gets. Like, case in point, Charlize Theron running in a straight line with a big ship.
That was sort of the thing everybody pointed at. With why don't you run to the left or the right? But,
like turn. But give us the hook. What is the central conceit of Prometheus?
I mean, it's almost the same story as Alien versus Predator. It's a guy named Wayland. This one, I think it's Peter Wayland instead of Charles Wayland. He assembles a team of scientists. He goes to a pyramid. Instead of in Antarctica, it's on a different planet way off in space. And, they're looking for answers to big mysteries. They're both old, dying guys. Like, I'm like, this is kind of the same story as Alien versus Predator, except instead of the predators, you have the engineers. So, it's kind of funny that like Alien versus Predator gets all this flack, and Prometheus was sort of posturing itself as being like this smart kind of return to form. I'm like, it's the same basic story.
Yeah, I never thought Prometheus was smart.
No,
but it was definitely successful to a degree.
I think the
budget was about 120 to 130 million, and then it grossed about 400 million. I think that's the second most or third most popular movie Ridley Scott's ever made, behind The Martian and Gladiator. So it's one of his most successful films financially. But it's plenty stupid at times. Yeah,
well, and I think it had financial success, but I think it also got a lot of criticism. And I think part of the problem with where the series goes after this is, they got a little bit too afraid that Prometheus was straying away from the Alien films, which is exactly what I like about it, is that it does something different. It goes down this whole Chariots of the Gods route. And, I don't always like what it comes up with, but I like that it at least grapples with these things. I think even more than the film itself, I love I got the art of the film book.
Holy moly. Okay.
I've got a lot of art of the film books for films that I don't necessarily like, or, that I'm kind of lukewarm on, but I love just like the imagination that went into it, and, all the creativity, the designs.
Or creativity that was borrowed from Jodorowsky's Dune, as has been pointed out in the documentary. It's like, oh, well, they never made that movie, so let's just steal them. Because people who don't know, Jodorowsky's Dune, a lot of that creative team reassembled and went on to Alien and employed a lot of their ideas there. And so it makes sense that Prometheus would, but there should have been at a minimum at the end, like a special thank you to Jodorowsky and Moebius for cooking up the design of that fucking big ass mountain.
Yeah. Or, I guess Giger's in the credits. Giger gets a thank you because he might have passed away not long after Prometheus, right? Or around that time. I forget. Yeah. But, also, like, I don't necessarily like how it reinterprets some of these things, because, like, for me, when you watch the first Alien movie, the ship looks biomechanical and this creature looks like fossilized and kind of fused into it. And the way that Prometheus kind of interprets it, it's less biomechanical and more just mechanical. And these things are suits. And, like, to me, that was never as interesting. Talking about the trailer.
Answering the questions makes the questions less interesting.
Well, when the trailer came out, I remember going down this whole kind of imagining what the film could be route, where, the trailer doesn't really give you anything. And I was like, oh, Prometheus is, he stole fire, he stole technology from the gods, and he was cursed. And I thought, like, it's going to be about humans stealing technology from these engineer gods, and we're cursed by them. And I thought, like, it's all about genetic manipulation and stuff, that maybe the twist was going to be that at the end it's a human who turns into that space jockey type creature. I thought, like, oh, that would be kind of twisted if you find out that, like, oh, maybe maybe not the space jockey and Alien, but maybe you could look at something like that and be thinking that it used to be human or something like a human. So
yeah, I think the further the movie goes and the more we learn about the engineers, the less interesting they become. And you have a clip and I have a clip. So I'm going to play your clip first from Prometheus' deleted scene when he comes face to face with Wayland.
What did he say? What did he say?
I told him you wanted to live forever. He asked why.
I really feel like that should have been in the film, because to me that's like a pivotal moment. But
why is he talking like Khal Drogo? I feel like, these are like highly advanced beings. I feel like they should almost talk like Dr. Manhattan and like the Watchmen or something like that. Be like, it's like, they're not Klingons. Like, what the fuck is going on?
I agree with you. I think it should have been more kind of
elevated,
well,
refined.
I mean, if you're going to talk like, even if it's alien language, it should be like Pinhead and Hellraiser or something like that. Something who's seen it all, some being that's above your petty human emotions. But I kind of like this idea that, you finally get to ask God these questions like, hey, I want to live forever. Look at this robot I built that's in my likeness. I want to be like you. And God's like, I'm going to murder you.
Yeah.
So, that is, that's neat. And, it's silly that the engineer just turns into this like slasher monster at the end.
Yeah, it's like all of a sudden he's the Incredible Hulk. I'm like, if you wanted to depict a futuristic society where you've got like different classes, like a warrior class and a scientific class and a philosopher class, and like that have like different roles in their society. But I just can't imagine that like these big giant meatheads are designing anything.
Liberty looking dudes. Like, to me, the idea that, if humans were engineered by this species that looked like those space jockey sort of elephantine things, like that's much freakier. That like, oh, we're the genetic experiment of this like horrible Lovecraftian monster that has motivations beyond our comprehension. I think that could have come across better if the monsters weren't just like giant pale.
Yeah, they should have never answered the question. Like when you see that creature, actually, I got the clip from Alien. I'll play that, but after you see it, they should have never answered the question: is that a monster or is that a suit? Because I don't want to know the answer. And I love how it's like it's like a hybrid of fossil and, like as you mentioned, like biomechanical kind of, I don't know, like some sort of weird. We can't quite place like where does the machine end and the creature begin, and like where's the fossil end and where's the living creature, and like it's so mysterious. And then of course you've got the hole in its chest where the ribs have broken outward, and that's all the information we need. I don't need to know that he's like the Incredible Hulk underneath the suit and like smashing through doors, which I have another clip where he just goes on a murderous rampage like a goddamn meathead. Yeah, like my favorite part of these two prequels is in Alien Covenant when they all get killed. I'm like, yes, get rid of the fucking engineers because you've gotten it wrong.
Yeah, we were wrong. We were so wrong.
We were so wrong. Yeah, but I guess that's kind of a cool thing. Like they misinterpret a signal, thinking that it's like here's our creator letting us know where to go, but instead it's like no, this is like. They were making weapons and they were about to fly to Earth to kind of wipe the slate clean and start over because they don't like how the experiment is going. Because it was an echo of Alien when they first investigate this distress signal. And as it turns out, it's a warning, as Sigourney Weaver figures out, not a distress call.
Yeah. Although even the idea that the alien species is maybe this bioengineered weapon, like Ridley Scott's always sort of alluded to that even before making Prometheus. I'm not sure if I even really like that idea because the alien itself is so mysterious. I almost thought like it would make more sense if it wasn't intended to be a weapon, if it was for terraforming, like they could just drop it off on a planet and they would
kill off all the hostile life.
Kill off all the hostile life. And, if they were actually like, if their purpose was something a little bit more, if it was something less obvious than them just being like murder machines, if like that was sort of incidental to what they really were. And, I do like the idea of them not being, like native species of any planet, that they were maybe engineered by whatever the space jockey was. And, they happened to get loose and the ship crashed. I kind of like that idea that they're designed.
So before you had seen anything after the 90s, in your own mind, why was that ship carrying that giant floor full of eggs? Because it was one of the most horrifying shots in the history of movies. Is when John Hurt looks around and for like a split, if you blink, you will miss it. But for a split second, you just see a sea of eggs going in all directions. And it's like, oh, like the majesty and the grandeur of what that suggests. It's like allowing you a brief little teeny tiny look inside the most nightmarish world imaginable. And then he slides in and then like that's the only glimpse that you get. But like, what did you think the purpose of that giant, farm of eggs was for?
Well, I think it would be like if we found a planet that had water and was kind of suitable for us, the first thing we'd do is start sending over microorganisms and plankton and, and then insects and plants. We would start turning it into our world. I kind of assumed, the alien might be something similar. They're sort of insect-like, the way they kind of secrete this resin. You could dump them on a planet that's got life that might be hostile to you and, come back in a year or two and it, maybe the aliens.
Unless it's a planet of predators, who would fuck them up?
maybe the predator started it. Who knows?
Yeah.
But
well, getting back to the idea of the creator meeting, a creation meeting its creator, I feel like Ridley Scott had already tackled it better in Blade Runner. It's like, if only you could see what I have seen with your eyes. But we do have another scene which you sent me where they explore this topic in greater detail.
Why do you think your people made me?
We made you because we could.
Can you imagine how disappointing it would be for you to hear the same thing from your creator?
I wish the movie had more of that kind of philosophizing and exploration.
And Fassbender's fantastic. The movie's got a lot of flaws. Fassbender's my favorite part of the movie.
Yeah, he's the real standout, and it makes sense that they brought him back for Covenant. Sorry,
this is prime Fassbender, right when he was becoming a superstar. This is like, I think, a year after he'd played Magneto, and I was like, "Who's that guy?" And then I'd seen him already in Inglourious Basterds, but he has that great scene there. But suddenly he was everywhere, and he was exploding and becoming this huge superstar. And then it almost seems like he kind of saw what his life could be as a superstar. I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to take a step back and ease into more of a character actor role. But for a brief shining moment, it looked like he was going to be, George.
Those X-Men movies scared him away.
It's like, this sucks. This takes over your life. Or maybe
I love.
Was he in both Apocalypse as well as Dark Phoenix? I can't
remember.
Oh yeah,
he was in Dark Phoenix. They got him back for that. They got everybody back.
That'll spoil for blockbusters for all time.
She was in that movie. If you look at her face the whole time, she looks like she just does not want to be there.
Yeah.
But
I didn't want to be there. Fucking Simon Kinberg, he can go to hell.
Well, I really like the scene of Michael Fassbender just kind of wandering around the ship before the humans come out of hibernation, because that's so eerie.
Lawrence of Arabia. You can say,
what does a robot do in his free time? And I think that kind of came from an idea that aliens, that James Cameron talked about maybe having Bishop just wandering around the ship, and how kind of creepy that would be. It's empty except for this robot looking around. But excuse me,
Bishop can wander around any ship where I'm sleeping anytime. I trust Bishop with my life.
Maybe he smuggled that alien egg on board. Who knows?
You never know. But I would let Bishop play the knife game on my hand. I got nothing but love and reverence for Bishop. But I do like the fact that David is perversely fascinated with all this technology that they're discovering. He's studying it. He's kind of taking it all in. And maybe he's been directed by Wayland to make sure that get some shit going. If you find some a little tiny little mysterious liquid,
or even that he's got his own motivations that are independent of Wayland, that he's already starting to go off the rails. It's kind of interesting. That scene, it also reminds me a little bit of Star Trek the Motion Picture. You get this giant V'ger being that's surpassed humanity, and it's looking for its creator.
Yeah.
And there's that disappointment of oh, these little parasite things are what made me. You're my god, and I think that scene that the clips showed touches on that idea of maybe some of these answers are going to be disappointing. And maybe if it's Prometheus, those answers are going to be very, very disappointing.
And,
but
and maybe
it's
the movie would be disappointing
as
well, because the movie's got its moments, it's got its ingredients. You got a great director, you got a great look, you got a great cast, and there are some good scenes. But just the inexplicable stupidity of the characters is really infuriating, because when you're watching Alien or Aliens, characters might be greedy, or they might be selfish, or they might have flaws, but they never come across as fucking morons. Even Bill Paxton, as Private Hudson himself, he might be have his comedic moments. But when push comes to shove, he's solving problems or kicking ass or whatever. But you have these characters in Prometheus, the one who sees the little tentacle monster, is oh, what's up, cutie little baby?
Yeah, that stuff is really kind of what sunk
it's awful
for me.
It's terrible. and just like it's just,
And
just
I know some people try to defend it, say like, "Oh no, those characters are supposed to be stupid on first," but it's like, then why am I watching a movie full of stupid people? Like,
exactly.
why would I want to watch that?
I want to watch movies with characters that I find fascinating. Even like the villain, like Paul Reiser and Aliens is more interesting than these dumbasses and Prometheus. And so that just got absolutely infuriating. And I think maybe I'm just doing this because it's fashionable, but I think all roads point to Damon Lindelof. I don't know if he had a direct hand in every flaw that I hate about the movie, but as somebody who does not like Damon Lindelof's work, it's easy to leave the blame at his doorstep. Ridley Scott is pure, and he wasn't responsible for this lame shit. It's all Damon Lindelof's fault.
For me, the Alien franchise was never like a tourist franchise. That each film you bring in a different director. They're all basically the same thing. The first four, where it's Sigourney Weaver running around and the aliens picking people off, and that you had different creative people, different directors, is kind of what made it fresh and interesting. And it never really felt to me like Ridley Scott was the steward of the franchise. In fact, like he didn't write to the first film. He didn't write it. Like I always think Alien, like who's the creator of Alien? Is it Dan O'Bannon? Is it H.R. Giger? Ridley Scott's just one of a bunch of people who I think kind of take credit for making that film great. And it sort of feels like because he's because he's lived so long, he's kind of the last man standing. It's like he's taken ownership over this franchise in a way that I'm not sure he ever really had the
I feel like a director, one of their best, most important jobs is learning like when to say yes and when to say no to all the contributions people are trying to make to a movie. Because if you say yes to everybody, your movie gets a little weird and overstuffed, but almost like acting like a filter, like we're taking this script, we're taking this photography, we're taking like this aesthetic, we're going to bring all these ingredients together, and we're not going to accept these other ingredients people are recommending, from their own, maybe from naivete, maybe from their own good intentions, but knowing what to say yes to and what to say no to. And Ridley clearly knew which ingredients to keep with Alien. So it makes him kind of the architect of that success, stirring all those ingredients together. And so he obviously has like a huge role in just doing like little things, like when the face hugger's in the egg and quivering and John Hurt's looking at it. Those are Ridley's fingers. Like he's actually physically doing the gesture. Like he's like rolling up his sleeves and doing the work. And it's fucking awesome. But but if people want to say there are many authors to the film, of course.
Ridley Scott's a visual genius, but I'm like, I don't necessarily think of Alien as his franchise. He's one director of many who made one of the great, I would say the greatest film out of the franchise. Still, even today, I know a lot of people love what Cameron did with Aliens, but like, I'm not sure. As much as I like what Ridley Scott did with Alien, he's not somebody I ever really wanted to come back to the franchise. And I was sort of fun with it with Prometheus because Prometheus is so sort of weird and so much of an offshoot. But I think
the franchise had gone away for a long time. Like I didn't even really think of Alien versus Predator as like official entries. So in my mind at that time, it had been like 14 years since we'd had like an Alien movie. And so I was fired up. And obviously when that first trailer dropped, it was like the trailer for Star Wars: The Force Awakens. Like we've all kind of reevaluated The Force Awakens in the 10 years since. But when those first teasers started dropping, we were like, are you fucking shitting me?
And it's a type of like science fiction exploration film that's disappearing. We rarely get these kinds of films anymore. I think Interstellar was sort of the last attempt at doing something like that. But the sort of big idea, big space exploration, what's out there kind of a movie, those have sort of disappeared in the time since. So I like Prometheus on those grounds.
Yeah, and it's definitely superior to Alien Covenant. Like maybe it's time, just in the interest of time, switching over.
Before we switch over to Alien Covenant, I just wanted to bring up another comic because you got the Prometheus Alien Predator crossover, which is something that I love that exists Fire and Stone. This is like a coffee book. Here, I gotta.
And what's the gist of it?
It's set long after Prometheus. It's got like Space Marines and stuff. I think it's set around the same time as Aliens, but it's got it's got engineers and it's got predators and it's got aliens. So I kind of like that Dark Horse put it on equal footing with the Alien and Predator story, but it also kind of made it distinct. It's like Prometheus is its own thing. It's a Prometheus Alien crossover. These are not the same franchise. These are things that are crossing over in this comic book, and I kind of wish it kept that vibe going forward because Prometheus, the original idea for the sequel was that it was going to be this movie called Paradise Lost, which was not an alien film really in any way. It was sort of a going further in the direction that Prometheus was pointing in. I think part of the reason why it became an alien film, Fox was a little bit nervous because Prometheus did well, but maybe not super well as they were hoping.
Yeah, it was an expensive movie with a giant marketing campaign.
And also in between Prometheus and Alien Covenant, that's when you go to all these rumblings of Neil Blomkamp wanting to do his alien movie, which would have ignored Alien 3, Alien Resurrection, and been like a direct sequel to Aliens.
Which is always a little weird to me. Like, I get when some people are saying like, oh, we're going to disregard the films that came after. Like when people make Halloween movies that like, we're going to keep the first one as canon, but nothing else. It's like, my attitude always is the things happen in the past, just embrace them. Like I mentioned this before we started recording. It's Grant Morrison's attitude towards writing Batman comics. He treats every single Batman comic that's ever been written, good, bad, mediocre. They're all canon. They're all fair game. And I feel like it's not your job to erase the past. Even if the past completely fucking sucks, find a creative solution that allows you to sidestep it or work around it. But I don't like this idea of erasing other filmmakers' work.
Yeah.
It all exists.
I completely agree. And like I said, I'm not somebody who gets hung up on what's canon or not or continuity. My reason for being trepidatious about what Neil Blomkamp wanted to do is I feel like it's anti-art saying, oh, well, Alien 3 made you feel bad because it killed off characters that you liked. So don't worry, Hicks and Newt, they're back and they're better than ever. They're all going to fight aliens together as a family. And it's that pandering. It's that these films can't be art that confronts you with something. It has to give just fans the fan service.
Yeah, nothing but chocolate
pudding. Eat the slop.
Yeah.
You idiots, eat it up. You like the power loader. Here's 50 power loaders fighting 50 alien queens. I think that kind of mindset is.
Yeah, they're treating the audience like spoiled children where you're constantly force feeding them cotton candy just to make them shut the fuck up.
So I think really. I don't like Alien Covenant very much, but I would have rather got Alien Covenant than Neil Blomkamp's film. Okay. But I think Alien Covenant suffers a lot for put the alien in it. And I think Ridley Scott, first of all, he didn't want it to be an alien film, and it's like shove this element in there that you don't like. So I think he's actively resentful of the Alien and Alien fans. I think that film just radiates
like Prometheus feels very thrown in last minute, where it's it doesn't even look like a real xenomorph. I'm like, well, this just feels stupid. Like, why are you adding this scene? It's like it ends the movie on this kind of strange note where it's like fan service, but it's so blatantly thrown in there just because someone put a gun to
again going back to Alien versus Predator Requiem. It's schlock. That's what it is. That shower scene. It's schlock. And to me, it really feels like Ridley Scott being like, oh, all you people who complained about Prometheus, because I think Prometheus got a lot of complaints that were people complaining for the wrong reasons. Like, put the alien in it, and how does this tie to Alien, and answer those questions. And I think, for me, the ending of Alien Covenant was like Ridley Scott, shoving the alien in people's faces, like, you want this? Here's your alien, lap it up, you assholes.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to play the clip.
I've got your clip here of the xenomorph on a rampage right here.
I got eyes on it, right fucking in front of me.
The alien in the first film, it's so mysterious and elegant, and here it's just
beautiful,
stupid thing smashed in its face right against you. So to me it almost feels like Ridley Scott, I hate the alien and I hate you, the audience, for making me put this thing in the movie, which was supposed to be very different. And you look at
it, makes you wonder why the fuck he even made the thing, because I think Alien Covenant's a genuinely stupid movie in a lot of ways. I think what I hate most is all the stuff where years after David has basically committed genocide, how you have all these plants that have the capacity to release spores that will allow aliens to hatch out of you. As fascinating as the life cycle of the creatures in the first movie, from egg to embryo to alien, that whole life cycle is just a masterclass in sci-fi. This is the exact opposite, where it's oh, well, we need them to encounter something that makes things come out of them, so we'll have it just be these little plants that they happen to stumble over. I thought it was fucking idiotic.
The storyboards for Paradise Lost, it was never supposed to be aliens coming out of them. It was people inhaling spores and turning into giant penis plants, and there's like real
Bring on the penis plants.
That's what the movie should have been. And like there's,
you can just call the movie Penis Plants and it'd make $100 million.
Also, like, to me, it was so strange that, you know, you go and you find all the living engineer aliens, and like I always sort of imagined that, you know, if you know, even if you sort of take the engineer from Prometheus as okay, that's the answer to Alien, like you would think their homeworld would look like, you know, an H.R. Giger painting. It looked like, again, I think Ridley Scott is just in a different place as a director than he was when he made the first Alien. He's changed a lot. He's changed a lot as an artist.
Well, and speaking of the engineer homeworld, I got a little clip when David comes to visit his wrath upon them. And what I like in Prometheus, I think once again, Michael Fassbender's the best part of the movie. And I love the idea of him pretending to be the less independent, less creative, kind of less idiosyncratic model. And at the very end, when the girl's being frozen in like cryogenic, whatever you call it, and she has that moment of realization where it's too late for her to do anything because she's already been put to sleep. She's like, it's David. In that moment of horror, like, oh my God, he's got this giant spaceship full of thousands of people that he can experiment upon till the end of his days. Like that kind of mad scientist aspect to his personality was really cool, but those moments are very, very brief in what is otherwise a really stupid movie. I can't stand Alien Covenant.
Sure. I mean, I'm wondering now that Alien Romulus is coming out, if it's going to tie into Alien Covenant in any way. I was wondering if it's going to try to bridge the gap somehow between Covenant and the first Alien movie, because it feels like, I think the idea of Ridley Scott doing another one was kind of dropped, but he's, I'm pretty sure, producing Romulus or has a credit on it anyway. So like, I'm wondering if he's going to want some kind of a tie-in. I'm wondering if, you know, maybe Michael Fassbender is going to have a cameo, you know, if there's going to be some connection drawn between these two films, or if it's just going to be one of those things that's ignored forever after this, maybe answered in a comic book. I don't know.
I just hope they have a better female lead than what's it, Catherine Waterston or Catherine Waterston. I thought she was a very weak female lead, where they're trying to go for that Sigourney Weaver thing. Like, first of all, her haircut looked totally ridiculous. I'm like, first rule of showbiz, your star has to look fucking smoking hot, has to look cool.
I think she's cute. I can't help it.
Awkward, she's like an awkward teenage boy.
I like when, you know, after they suck the alien out, they kind of drop it off, you know, by opening that bay at the very end, and she just pokes her head up and she's like quivering, and there's all these dust particles or metallic things in the air. I'm like, oh, she's adorable. But
I saw what's it, Naomi Rapace, or however you say the name of the actress.
She's much better. She's
a much more compelling lead.
And I think out of all these leading ladies that, you know, we might talk about in the franchise, I think Naomi Rapace is the one that feels the least like a Ripley clone. I think she kind of is, but like, you know, she's got her own motivations, and, you know, maybe they're stupid motivations, but like she feels the most like her own character.
And I love the cesarean scene when she's pulling the baby out of her. Like, I was like, this is fucking gross, but I'm into it.
It's sort of, it's kind of too bad. Like her career in Hollywood, I feel like kind of got relegated to these sort of direct-to-video action movies, which she's good in. Like she's doing a lot of these like science fiction, kind of lower budget, medium budget Netflix type movies and stuff, but I like watching her. I think she's great.
Yeah, she's definitely got chops. Yeah. She's the original Elizabeth Salander from the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and for a hot minute there, like Fassbender, it looked like she was going to be the next big thing. She was like in Brian De Palma movies, making out with Rachel McAdams and all that stuff. So suddenly she was everywhere after Prometheus. But I thought she was much better than Miss Waterston, who just did not do it for me at all. I thought Billy Crudup was fucking lame. I thought Danny McBride was fucking lame. I thought everybody was lame. The only person I liked was Michael Fassbender.
It also feels like, in contrast to the first film, like, oh, do we really not have the sorts of character actors we used to have? People who look like real blue collar guys, like, you know, when it's
plumbers and truck drivers and like drywall experts, like, you know, who work with their hands.
You want to make science fiction feel grounded, you put Harry Dean Stanton in space.
Yeah,
you know, that's how you make it feel like, you know, you're watching real people in a real situation. And I think, like, you know, I know Danny McBride, he obviously likes horror because he's involved with all the David Gordon Green horror stuff.
Who's the worst director of horror? 25 years.
But it almost feels like we need to fill this movie with people who are like conventionally attractive. I guess all we have is comedians. Like, you know, that's
I don't mind
a
the
little bit
like getting Charlize Theron to be in Prometheus, and I like how she and Idris Elba just have a casual bump, because apparently in the original script for Alien, Dallas and Ripley were supposed to say, like, we got nothing to do, like, let's just go fuck for 5 minutes because it'll kill the time. But like the idea of kind of casual relationships between people when they're off in space, of course you're gonna need to get your rocks off.
Well, I like
Charlize Theron has never looked better than she looked in Prometheus. I think she's an absolute goddess in it, but when it comes to
brushes him off until he insinuates that maybe she's a robot. Then she's like, "Oh, I'm going to prove it to you."
Yeah, my parts are moist. But when it comes to ensemble cast of character actors, I think there's a strong case to be made for Alien as the best ensemble cast in any movie, irrespective of genre. And I've got a little taste of that right here.
I'll tell you, I'm eating birch root this, but then I taste better. You know what I'm saying? The other one over there.
You pound down the stuff like this.
Listen, I'd rather be eating something else, but right now I'm sticking to food.
You just know what it's made of.
No, Dad.
So here we are, got the finest character actors in the world talking about eating pussy in the middle of the Alien movie, which I don't think I ever like heard what he was saying until like decades later. But I love this. I mean, like I said, whether you're talking dramas, science fiction, war movies, I don't care. The best ensemble cast ever assembled for any movie is an Alien, where it's all killer. It's no filler. They're all unique. They're all dynamic. They'll have different strengths and weaknesses. They're just irresistible.
The way they play off of each other is perfect. Like
they're giving to each other. Like they give you something, and then it's like a dialogue. Not like, oh, now it's my turn. I'm going to try to steal the show. Really good actors know how to be giving to their collaborators.
I mean, Sigourney Weaver, she was completely green on Alien, and like she tells that behind the scenes story about Yaphet Kotto giving her a hard time to kind of get her that mindset, you know, where she plays it. She's, you know, saying, I am the captain of this ship, and or whatever the line is. You know, Yaphet Kotto kind of pushed her until she could deliver the line in a way that was believable. And
it's adversarial. And
you know, I think like the tension between them, the camaraderie between some of them, you know, it all comes out perfect. And Ridley Scott talked about kind of being really hands off with the cast. Like he didn't.
Oh, it's like they feel like they've been in space for a fucking year before they rolled cameras. And speaking of years, I forgot to mention, when going back to the timeline, Alien Covenant took place in 2104. Alien takes place in 2122, so 18 years
according
later.
To this timeline, I feel like this timeline is off a little bit for a reason we might get into during Alien 3, but I think it's a little bit too early.
I was like, when does that take place? But I should also mention that right before Alien Covenant, when it comes to the Alien timeline, Weyland Yutani is founded in 2099 by the merger of Weyland Corp and Yutani Corporation. So for people who are keeping track of these things, we're now in a Weyland Yutani status quo as opposed to just Weyland.
It's funny, you only get the young Peter Weyland from Prometheus in like those promotional videos, like the TED Talk. And I like that the Alien films have so many other like materials, but it's so weird to me that like, oh, Guy Pearce is just going to be in old age makeup the whole time. Like it's really kind of not great old age makeup. It's a really bizarre choice. You know, for a role like that, you would think like cast
Christopher Plummer, like cast
Christopher Plummer, Max von Sydow. You know, cast somebody like that who's old, who
or an old Michael Caine, but
you know, who like, you know, they show up because he's not in like a ton of the movie. Like, you know, if he just shows up for those couple scenes and like really sells it, and it's an actor who has that kind of gravitas and weight and age.
The only time you have to do it that way is if you also have scenes of them when they're young, like Charles Foster Kane. Wells plays them at 25, and he also plays them at 75. So you age him up. But if he's only going to be old in the movie, cast a really good old actor.
Anyway, that's just a little nitpick of many, but
no worries. Sorry. So getting back to Alien 1979, obviously we could do a 10-hour podcast just about Alien, but just as someone who loves it as much as I do, like all these years later, I mean, who knows how many times it's the two of us have watched it, but the numbers speak for themselves. They made it for $11 million. It grossed 184. Like, to put that in perspective, imagine if somebody made $100 million movie now and it grossed like $18.4 billion. I think am I off by a digit or a decimal? Anyway, somebody else check my math. But like we never, we never see movies now making nearly 20 times back their
Well,
budget.
and,
That is just unheard of. This movie was a fucking runaway.
They really had to go into overtime to get the creative accounting in such a way that they didn't have to pay Ridley Scott.
Absolutely.
So that's one reason why he didn't come back for a sequel, is because
They shafted him.
they shafted it. Which
I love the interviews of people coming out of the theater, like in 1979, and like some of these guys are like, oh man, like I think it's really important that people see this and like learn what aliens are really about. Like, you can, like they're taking it as like a documentary. Like, but people really, the same way they saw The Exorcist and felt like it was real, they saw Alien and felt like it was fucking real.
Yeah, there was also merchandising that came out for Alien. There was an Alien action figure for little kids, even though, I mean, I love this film as a kid, but kids can handle a lot, I think. Like, I love this film as a little kid. And,
I saw it on VHS for the first time. I think I was 10, because Aliens, when it came out on HBO, suddenly I watched it like every day for like a straight year. And finally, my dad was like, well, we should watch Alien. I was like, Alien? And because, I was 10. So we watched that on VHS. Like, whoa, okay. That's cool too. But I saw Aliens first.
Yeah. Well, and my favorite tie-in thing is the Ella Dean Foster novel.
And is that a strict novelization of the film, or is it kind of depart?
There's some subtle differences, especially because I think Alan Dean Foster, when he had to write it, he didn't even know what the alien was going to look like. So he had to get a little bit creative. But I think
keep it in the shadows. That way nobody knows.
You're at the best film novelization ever. So Alan Dean Foster is definitely...
So with the novels, I think they did novelizations of the first 4 movies as they came out, and then they started writing a shitload of books kind of set in and around the Alien universe. But I've never read a single novel set in the Alien setting.
Yeah, there's a bunch. There's a lot of Alien novels. There's also, I think, some like audio play adaptations. If you're somebody who doesn't feel like sitting down and reading some of these, you can just kind of listen to them if you want. But yeah, I'm not sure if there's like a clear, like, you got to read this. There's a couple of really interesting ones, like Alien Phalanx is a more recent one that I liked, that, it's sort of ambiguous what time period it is and if it's just sort of this hypothetical setting. But I like, one thing I like about the Alien films is the creativity it gets out of other people, and that's one thing that's cool about the comics, because you have interesting stories, interesting artists.
Well, everybody wants to bring their A game. Like when you've seen so many different people do some of their best work in this setting, like take Jerry Goldsmith doing the score. It's like, well, this is a fucking incredible score. Then it's like, oh, but you also have creature designs by Giger. And it's like, you have so many different ingredients that are like best in class we've ever seen. If you're going to do anything in the alien world, I imagine everybody, at least I would hope every member of the cast and crew would wake up and like, we've got an enormous, we got enormous shoes to fill, so step up, bitches.
But that's one thing that's cool about the comic books. It's like, oh, like Mike Mignola's illustrating this one, and you get all these, you get these like really sort of creative people just doing their own kind of takeoff of it, and interesting stories, and that's something I love about the franchise, and I think like that's all kind of sprung from the first film.
Yeah. So getting back to the first movie, I think we've hammered home enough, just how cool it is. The idea of like, you've got this crew of basically like 7 truck drivers with they were in a refinery processing 20 million tons of mineral ore returning to Earth. Like, these are not superheroes. They're not super geniuses. They're just all really competent. Like, Dallas is really competent. Ripley's really competent. I just love the fact that they all have different skills, and they, they'll back each other in the corner. Like, you're the science officer. Like, what is your point of view? But everybody's got their roles, and everybody just seems, they're so convincing in those roles. And I think Hollywood is, in a lot of ways, kind of lost sight of, if you make movies about truck drivers, and then a lot of truck drivers are going to show up and enjoy your movie, and like, they're going to be able to relate to the characters and just be able to write them with so much authenticity, or giving your actors free reign to improvise where they bring that authenticity. But like, Yaphet Kotto, John Hurt, Veronica Cartwright. I mean, just
and I
some of the finest work of their careers.
The sequel, like Alien 3, kind of kept that up with these interesting character actors.
Totally.
You feel really blue collar.
Not
but I feel
quite
like,
as good, but still really fucking good.
But I feel like that's something that's been lost a little bit with the more recent ones. And I'm kind of nervous looking at the cast of Romulus, where they just look like a bunch of TikTok models or something. I'm like, these like conventionally attractive teenage.
Find me 10
people,
influencers and step on it.
I mean, Fede Alvarez, I don't know if he was just mostly joking, but he was talking about the casting process where it'd be like, oh, so have you seen any of the Alien movies? And it'd be like, yeah, I've seen the first two. Oh, which was your favorite? Prometheus. So yeah, I think he talked a little bit about that. And I think like that's kind of it's not just the Alien movies. I think like in general, there's like a weird kind of drought of like authentic character actor type people in in the field of up and coming actors right now. I feel like a lot of people are looking for conventionally attractive people who aren't necessarily
that's what's so unusual about Sigourney Weaver is I find her so striking and so sexy and so beautiful, but she's not conventionally beautiful in any way, shape, or form. Like maybe the most erotic moment in the history of science fiction is when she's changing wardrobe to kill the alien at the end. I'm like you're supposed to be thinking about how terrified you are, but it's like, oh my gosh, she's in her underwear and she's like spreading her legs for the camera. I was like,
what I love about
a lot of mixed signals.
Because I think people sort of like I've seen some people kind of criticize the film being like, oh, like it just turns into cheesecake there. What it captures, that ending when she's changing clothes and she's sort of getting relaxed and ready to go into hypersleep is she lets her guard down. She's vulnerable. She's naked.
Yeah.
And like you get that POV shot. Well, maybe it's not a POV, but it's the handheld shot that sort of implies the aliens like they're watching her, and it's this sort of voyeuristic thing. Like I think,
and it's there right in plain sight. Like you're looking at it for like a minute before the hand comes. Like, oh my god, it's been right there the whole time.
So, like I think people kind of forget that when they're criticizing the film, and they sort of expect her to be like tough and like have her walls up the whole time because like she's a real character. And I think like Sigourney Weaver sort of talked about how people sometimes write the character of Ripley wrong, especially like she talked about how hard it was to get the script for Alien 3 to where she wanted it, where she's talked about all these writers make Ripley sound like a pissed off gym coach. She's yelling and swearing and she's bossy and like
the strong female character is one of the greatest problems that have plagued Hollywood for decades. Almost never do they get it right, but when they do, it's solid gold. But Ripley is the poster child of getting it right, where enormous sensitivity, enormous intelligence, enormous charisma, but when she needs to be, tough as nails, but she's not.
Well, and also
fucking like, Rambo. She's tough because she has to be.
And she's also kind of a loner. Like, she's not like 100% the perfect person in all these ways. Like, she does things that piss people off. Or I even like in, there's moments in Aliens or Alien 3 when you have a character kind of turn to her because she's a natural survivor, but she's not a natural leader. She's not a natural leader.
But she becomes one. Like I feel there's a transition. She's
kind of a reluctant one. Where
when Dallas is dead, there's a turning point where they're kind of strategizing, and Yaphet Kotto keeps kind of running his mouth, and she's like, "Shut up!" And the way she says it, you're like, "Whoa!" Like, where did that fire come from?
The moment where like Yaphet Kotto really kind of pushed her, but like she does stuff in the first movie even where she's gonna leave them outside. She doesn't want to let them in because of the quarantine procedure, and she's 100% right. But like after everybody's pissed off at her, like,
oh yeah,
that's you're gonna leave. You're gonna leave
the
him out
burden
there
of leadership
to die.
is that you have to make the hard decisions, and you don't get to be anybody's friend. And I feel like that's one of the first moments.
But
where she really
even like Captain Dallas kind of like is like, So I think it's interesting how she kind of fits into that dynamic, and it feels so organic when you watch the first film. How she kind of rises to being the one who survives.
If they tried to do that scene in 2024, there'd be some scenes like, well, you're a male and you're a misogynist and you need to shut up and I'm the leader now. Like all girls get in formation. Like, that's how it would be in 2024 on a show like, or a movie like Star Trek Section 31 or something like that. They do the heavy lifting here. They actually make her a real thinking character so that when she is strong, you believe it. And it's just like,
I like strong women, and I think like another science fiction example I always think of is in the Star Wars movies with Princess Leia. Like, people talk about Last Jedi, the strong women and don't question her. She's, but you look at Empire Strikes Back, there's that scene where
she's handing out orders on Hoth.
Yeah. Hoth, how they're going to escape. And, you have that one pilot who's like, come on, like two fighters against a Star Destroyer. And she's like, we're going to shoot the laser. You're going to go by. She explains it. She gets everyone
calm. she's got a calm sense of strength and a calm sense of confidence. She
she's
doesn't
a
have a
great
chip on her shoulder. She's
leader,
a natural leader, and she knows what she's doing because it comes from competence, and she knows what the fuck she's talking about. And I think just oftentimes you have a lot of screenwriters out there where their own personality flaws become like the screenplay's flaws. And I feel like, boring people write boring characters, and you need really interesting writers to write really interesting characters.
So anyway, Ripley's a great character, and I think from here on out in the franchise, we might have a little like dip in and out, but basically, the first 4 movies, it's Ripley's story. So I guess we're getting into that. Maybe before
but it's like it blows my mind just how much Sigourney Weaver, like how much she dominated my childhood. Like between movies like Ghostbusters or movies like Alien or Aliens, and then like my first tentative exploration of like quote unquote like adult movies like Working Girl, where it's like her and Harrison Ford, but I'm just like, God damn, like she was one of the most influential and just like powerful actresses of my childhood. And when I watch her now, it's like, it just blows my mind just how many amazing performances she gave us over how many years and like how many different genres. She is just a marvelous actress in so many ways. And like no matter how good the writing is, in the end, you need an actress with all those interesting dimensions that she brings to the table. And Sigourney Weaver, Hall of Fame. I fucking love her.
Mm-hmm. Well, before we move on to Aliens, I was wondering if you wanted to talk a little bit about Alien Isolation.
Totally, but put a pin in that. I'm gonna do my pee break video, and then we'll be back in 2 minutes. There are 2 types of guests on Wrong Reel: those who dance to that song and those who don't. I think I've asked you
Did you
before.
catch me?
Oh, were you boogieing? I don't think I saw.
I was bopping along. I wasn't
very
dancing,
nice.
but I was.
Well, I always ask
feeling it.
everybody, do you recognize where that song comes from?
I'm not sure. Where is it from?
It's the Super Nintendo adaptation of the RPG Shadowrun.
Oh, I've never played it, but it's got
fucking
a good
rules.
beat.
Yeah, well, if you combine film noir, cyberpunk, and fantasy races like elves and orcs and that sort of thing, what you're left with is Shadowrun. So it's an interesting blend of sci-fi and fantasy. But speaking of games, you made me aware of Alien Isolation, which I did download, and I played for like an hour or so the other night. I had a fistful of edibles in my system, and I was really struggling. I was like, because I finally realized, this is one of those games where I'm constantly how do I get this door open? How do I get this door open? I was I just want to get killed by an alien anyway. I never even saw a fucking alien. So, but before we get to your clip, which is eerie and horrifying, I do have a little taste from the trailer. So Alien Isolation came out in 2014. It is set in 2137, so 15 years after the Alien movie, written by Dan Abnett. And here we go.
Let me be
So if memory serves, this is one of those games that I think you've cleared multiple times. So
Yeah.
okay, I've barely scratched the surface. So lay it on me. What is the what's going on with Alien Isolation?
I mean, it's 10 years old now, and I think it's officially a video game classic. It's you follow Ripley, but not Sigourney Weaver's Ripley. You follow her daughter, who, depending which version of Aliens you watch, it plays a role in how that
It's a
story
cut
plays
scene
out.
from the theatrical, but you see a reference to her in Aliens.
So it falls into an interesting place if we're talking about canon and continuity in between the first and second movie, and trying to find out what happened to her mother, who disappeared mysteriously. And arguably, like, it's better than most of the movies. It's got a really great story. It's got a really great atmosphere.
How do the aliens get on the ship?
Well, there's only one alien for most of it. Anyway, I don't want to spoil how it goes, but I think
is it like survival horror where you're constantly kind of being chased by it, and you're like, oh, I need to seal it off here so that I can go over here and things like that?
Things like that. The alien can make its way through ducts. You have to hide from it. It's always sort of on the prowl looking for you.
Gotcha.
The game's pretty famous for its AI system, which, you have the alien kind of figure out where you are over time and figure out your patterns. And
so it studies.
That makes it very scary, because like most of the Alien games are action games. They're shooting, you play as Colonial Marines or Predator or whatever, just blasting hordes and aliens. Like, I don't know if people have played the what's it called, Fire Team Elite, I think, is the most recent one, where it's just like you shoot a million aliens and it's schlock. But I think like that's most of the Alien video games, and for me this is the only one that I've played that really kind of captures that mood and atmosphere of the first film, where you're under-equipped, you're hiding, you're scared, and you have this alien which you can't kill. You can kind of fend it off. But even like if you use the flamethrower to fend it off, after a while it gets a little bit bolder, and eventually that stops working as well as it did. And it's so scary and it's so much fun, and it's a great story, and it kind of nails the look and feel of everything.
All right. Well, I have a question for you, because you sent me a clip which is very Lovecraftian and disturbing, and I want to know what the fuck is going on right here. Like, that's totally gross. So give me a spoiler. What is that?
That's hiding under a table, and the alien comes in through the duct, and it looks for you. And while it's looking for you, it drags its tail around the table and goes under your leg.
I thought it was like maybe another creature or some like some sort of tentacle monster or whatever. I was like that. Anyway, I don't think I've ever actually spent a lot of time looking at their tail, unless it's like coming through something. Yeah. So maybe that's why it seems so otherworldly.
It's a very like back to basics. It's like, hey, you know what's scary? An alien. And it kind of captures that feeling of the first movie and sort of adds to it. And the setting's really interesting. Most of it's on this space station that's kind of like a giant mall super structure.
It kind of looks like the Nostromo a little bit.
I mean, the first ship you're on is like very similar to the Nostromo, but once you're on the space station, it's kind of you find like closed noodle shops and
interesting.
There's a lot of really interesting things in there. I think you would like it if you keep playing it. I have my lady friend playing through it. She's about halfway, and it's just been a lot of fun watching her get scared and jump and like, oh, I'm not going down that corridor because the alien's right there. And you also have like some of the androids that are
the horror genre in games hits you so much harder than it does in a movie, because when a movie can be a great passive experience, but it's the same experience every time. But when you're holding the controller and it's vibrating to reflect your heart rate as it's accelerating because something's about to kill you, like it just hits your brain in a different way and gives you a completely different experience. So a well-made horror game is not to be casually dismissed. Yeah.
And the space station setting, it does remind me a little bit of the Alien Dead Orbit comics, which are like one of the later Dark Horse ones.
Oh, we'll get there. That's toward the end of our timeline. Yeah. Okay. So save Dead Orbit, because Dead Orbit, according to my timeline that I looked up, doesn't come around till 2295. So we got a few more stops.
I don't know how people figure these out, because I'm like, I don't know. It's in space. Maybe it takes place before the first one or after, or I don't know.
Yeah, so right where we are right now, we have a couple of different things that take place between Alien and Alien. So we've got Alien Isolation, which is in 2137. Alien Romulus, which comes out in a couple of weeks, takes place in 2142. And then as long as we're doing show and tell, we got the Alien role-playing game, which is a module, a starter module called Hope's Last Day, which takes place, I guess, in theory, 2179, but it's all the events to take place with Newt and her family leading up to the arrival of all the Marines. And basically, how did that place go down in flames? So yeah, if you really want to put your players right in the shoes of all those people, when we all know what happens to them, play the role-playing game. But we've played a lot of D&D and now a decent amount of Mjorkborg. Maybe one day we'll take a crack at a little Alien, but Traveler is also calling our name.
Science fiction, at least, at some point, it would be fun to get into that.
But in that we're on the kind of the pivot point before Aliens, any predictions for Alien Romulus? Like, or what do you know about it? Like, I know precious little apart from some members of the cast, and that it basically looks to me like they're trying to play the hits. It looks like there are certain scenes or moments that are iconic from Alien 3, 2, and 1 for people who never got to see those movies in the theater. So it's just trying to recreate that experience. And actually, speaking of Romulus, I got a little taste of the trailer right here.
Are you sure you want to do this?
Like, clearly a ripoff of Alien 3 or Alien Cubed, as I used to like to say in the early 90s. But high hopes, low hopes, what do you think?
I would say medium hopes. Like, I like Fede Alvarez. I like his Evil Dead reboot. I like Don't Breathe. But I feel like I kind of know exactly what I'm going to get from this. And it does sort of feel like you said, just trying to play the hits, just kind of back to basics. Again, what I really loved about the franchise, how it used to be, was how each one felt really like, okay, we're going to do a new spin on the same basic formula.
Yeah, stylistically really distinctive, or at least the first four were. And this does not feel stylistically distinctive.
No, I feel like, Fede Alvarez, he's a horror guy. It's probably going to be competent, I'd imagine. But it's also not a very exciting pick of somebody to do an alien film. Like, I would love, somebody who's not necessarily a horror or science fiction person to just kind of bring a fresh vision to it.
Or something crazy like inventing a new franchise. I know that's unheard of over at the House of the Mouse in Disney, but maybe the same way that Ridley and Dan O'Bannon and Giger and all those people cooked up the original Alien 45 years ago, maybe get a bunch of smart people in a room together and try to come up with something new.
That's too much to hope for.
It's too much to hope for. Yeah. But maybe it'll come in the form of a comic or a novel or a game.
I love that that idea that Jodorowsky had of let's just get a bunch of really interesting artists to create something that you can film. I think, of course, most of those people went on to create Alien. That's sort of the direct child of the Jodorowsky's Dune. But I kind of miss that idea of really distinctive artists. We're gonna have Chris Voss do this and Mobius do this, and Giger design this whole planet. Who are the people today who could maybe do something like that? I don't know. I'm sure they're out there, but Giger is such an interesting person to pick to even create science fiction. I've got
your art is a very dark art, as Jodorowsky famously said in that doc. But it's true; it is a very dark art.
But I think there's something really brilliant about looking at that guy's art and being like, oh, you should make this science fiction movie. It's so out there and it's so different from anything that I'd really seen in science fiction before it. I would like to see people who are real artists kind of take a crack at if not Alien, like you said, doing something original. But
and then
if you're going to make another Alien movie,
everybody talks about mining IP. If you bring in an artist to give you a cool idea, you can mine it for half a century, as we've seen with Alien. So it's it just blows my mind. And you don't have to spend $200 million on a new concept. Maybe spend $10 or $20 million on a new concept. It's I think they try to make these movies so goddamn big that it's if there's any trouble along the way and it fails in such spectacular fashion that you lose the GDP of an entire nation. It's but the first Alien movie back in 1979, admittedly not adjusted for inflation, had a budget of $11 million. You don't have to break the bank to come up with a cool new idea.
I mean, Ridley Scott tells that story about working on the first one, and doing the storyboards. And when they saw the storyboards, they doubled the budget because they could picture what the film was going to be. It was like,
Gotcha.
oh, like this is a real movie. Like,
and he still economized beautifully. Like all those tunnels and passageways, he reused them or would redress them. Like he didn't have a bunch of sets to work with, but he knew how to get like maximum value out of his limited resources. And yeah, we watch Alien now, it seems like a AAA budget movie.
You know, all the storyboards. Like I think there was such a clear vision for that first one. And some of the sequels too, but like mostly, you know, if we're talking about Alien, you had such a clear vision, and like now it feels like a lot of films are kind of made out of a lack of vision or like a real insecurity. And you know, when they talk about like redoing the special effects for a movie a dozen times because they keep changing things, and you know, I like that idea of
like Star Trek, the show. I don't need to see the special effects updated ever. Give me the shitty special effects in the 60s.
Well, I'm not even talking about like old movies getting updated. I'm talking about like, you know, a Marvel film where like, oh, we can't decide on what the costume should look like, so special effects artists have to redo it 20 times. You know, like when we talked about Godzilla -1, you know, you had the special effects artists say, well, you know, we had a really clear idea of what we wanted, and we worked towards it, and we accomplished that. Like, and there was not really any deviation in how these things should look or what they should be. So I think like if you have a clear vision, sometimes that'll A, make your movie better, but B, also save you a lot of money.
Yeah, or make you a lot of money. Like James Cameron famously in his pitch for this for Aliens came out in 1986, which takes place in 2179. But during his pitch, he famously had either a chalkboard or a whiteboard. He was talking to all the execs and all the suits and all the producers. He wrote Alien on the board, added an S to the end, and put a line through it into a $sign, and everybody's like, genius! Give us money. And all it took. And that's precisely what Cameron did. Went out and made a hit movie with not one, but multiple aliens. And just to give people an idea, the movie cost $18.5 million. And it went on to generate $183 million in box office, which once again, we're talking about box office returns 10 times the initial budget. I mean, no movies today do that unless they're a really low budget horror film, like something like Smile that happens to take off. And I just feel like, these alien budgets, so many of these franchises, the budgets have gotten totally out of control, totally out of proportion. And once again, just whip out a chalkboard, write Alien, add an S, put a line through it, and you're off to the races. But there actually is a real vision here, because I think James Cameron, at least in the 1980s, really understood, like, I can do truck drivers, but I can also do Marines.
I mean, he used to be a truck driver.
But I've got a clip of my favorite Marines right here.
Heavy formation of parade. I love the Corps.
Man, this floor is freezing.
What do you want me to do? Fetch your slippers for you?
Gee, would you, sir? I'd like that.
Look into my eye. Fall in, people.
Like, I love the Marines in this. And that drill sergeant, not drill sergeant, but it's that sergeant, he's an actual Vietnam vet. Like, when you watch the behind the scenes, he's like, you put a gun in my face, I'm going to shove it up your ass. You're like, Jesus fucking Christ. Like, I believe you. Like, he's so hardcore. And when his soldiers are marching by him into formation, he's like, bunch of badasses. Like, he's so proud. Like, he busts their balls, but he's also building them up. And I think all that shit, it's like, you know, it's Hall of Fame sci-fi action filmmaking.
There's so many Marines introduced to the film. Each one feels like a character. Nobody turns into like, just like, you know, some you don't really know too much about, but like you get a little bit of banter, you get a little bit of something from each one. There's something distinct, you know, the pilot, the where she wears her aviator glasses, or
she looks cool as shit. Yeah.
She looks, you know, like each one's got like a little
in
something.
Space. You don't need aviator sunglasses.
Yeah, I know. Well, like I know. Cool. I mean, Hicks, Michael Biehn wasn't the original actor for Hicks. He was kind of a last-minute replacement, which is sort of surprising that, like,
was it James Remar, or who was the original Hicks? Or
maybe I forget off the top of my head. I used to know this, but I just know that Michael Biehn.
Whoever got cast, I think he had a drug problem, and they just were unreliable.
Yeah. But he talks about like the heart on his costume, because he wasn't the one that customized his own armor, and he's like, this is just stupid. Like, why would you put a heart right where somebody could snipe you or shoot at you? But you know, I like that each one's got like a little something, and you know, the dynamics between them, like Drake and Vasquez, like they all feel like such characters.
Too bad. Yeah, and they're slapping on the face and the shit talking. They're you know, they love each other, but all they do is bust each other's balls all guided in. It doesn't matter what gender you are. you better be able to talk some serious shit or you're going to get eaten alive by these people. And the chemistry is just off the fucking charts. And when they land, you're like, there's not a creature alive that's going to be able to withstand these people. They're going to get their fucking asses kicked. And sure enough, the first encounter, like 90% of the Marines get fucking slaughtered. And you're like, oh, now it's a horror movie. Like it's switched.
Yes. And James Cameron, Aliens didn't have like a massive budget. Like you look into it and like they had to really stretch certain things. It wasn't as much as 18 million. I think like it had a budget around the same as Star Trek 5, which is a film I like, but Star Trek 5 looks like garbage.
I know Bill Tech loves it.
I love Star Trek 5 actually. Like, but
I saw it 1,000 times on TV, like everybody else who was a kid in the 1980s.
Yeah.
That movie sucks ass compared to Aliens.
But Aliens looks like 100 times better, and like a lot of it kind of comes from like James Cameron coming out of that like Roger Corman school and knowing how to do things cheap. And like, you know, you give him a decent budget, and he knows how to make every dollar count on screen. Like every penny's up on screen, every penny's twice up on screen. You know, I think he's like just one of those guys who really knew how to stretch a budget, which like it's sort of funny now he's got these like mega sized budgets for Titanic and Avatar. But, you know, I think like, you know, there was a time when he was a guy who could just take a decent budget and make it look like the most expensive film without it being the most expensive film.
Is it a controversial statement to say, I think Aliens is the best movie he ever made?
I don't think that's controversial. I think the only ones that might give you a debate are the Terminator fans. I think people might say Terminator 2 is his best film or the first Terminator is his best film.
I mean, Terminator 2 is certainly more expensive, but I think Aliens is much more creative.
I think, you know, I think the first Terminator is maybe his best film, even though that's even smaller budget and, you know, it's got a couple like wonky things about it. I think just like the creativity and the originality there. But Aliens is like, but Aliens is such a perfect follow-up to Alien because in some ways it's so similar and in some ways it's so different. And it just feels like it's building up off the first film in all these interesting ways and introducing elements like, you know, not just more aliens, but the Queen Alien and even, like the face hugger, you only see it jump out of the egg in the first movie, but like I love the skittering face huggers that are after Ripley and Newt and just all these things that are introduced. And the human technology, how he kind of updates, you know, Aliens is 57 years after the first movie, you know, the Marines, the power loader, the spaceship, the drop ship, the, you know, all that technology stuff. Like, you know, Cameron really gets technology, especially back then. Like I think just how he depicted it was like so intriguing and so
and like little things like he says like, oh, your camera's not working, and they just go and hit their head against the wall and all right, now it's fixed. Like sometimes you just got to whack your TV and the picture clears up. But quick question for you, there's a line which I've always found wonderfully suggestive of things that might exist outside of the alien universe, but when they're talking about the mission and someone says, was this just another bug hunt? Like the Pollock system bug hunt. What do you know about the Pollock system bug hunt? Has that been explored in any comics? Or is it just one of those weird, ambiguous references that expands the world, allows our imagination to do a little work, but we'll never really know?
I don't think that's specifically been expanded upon. I know in the comics, every once in a while, they'll introduce an alien creature that's not related to the alien, but something else. I never took the line literal in that way. Some people have definitely taken it and run with it. And I know Fede Alvarez talked about like focusing in on that line when he was making Romulus, but to me, it was always like a wild goose chase kind of a phrase. Like,
gotcha.
Like, you know, like you show up looking for aliens and like you know, maybe it's like a cockroach or something like that.
Well, I figure like with people settling planets, there will be some life forms that are more like a giant moth or a giant cockroach. And so it makes sense if you need some Marines.
Is this going to be a stand-up fight or a bug hunt? You know, I think like the implication is that like, you know, oh, there's wild, dangerous aliens here, and you go to a planet and it's just like a bunch of cockroaches, you know? But like Cameron also, he talked a lot about being influenced by the novel Starship Troopers. And you can kind of
which I finally read. There it is. Oh, proudly displayed on my shelf. Different in tone and style from the Verhoeven film, but
I love them both.
If you're a crunchy sci-fi lover, give it a read. It will entertain you.
Yeah, you know, like the power armor in the Starship Troopers novel, you can kind of look at the power loader in Aliens, and there's things like that that kind of translate.
Well, but I love that speaking of which, you sent me the clip, so let's let it rip.
away from her, you bitch!
I mean, you want to talk about Mama Bear versus Mama Bear? A queen alien.
It's a cat fight.
Yeah, versus like Sigourney Weaver. Once again, I talked earlier about her sensitivity combined with her toughness. The way she takes Newt under her wing and protects her and looks after her in a very maternal way without ever making the movie feel lame or stupid. Like usually somebody tries to add this type of ingredients to a movie like Aliens, it'd be like adding a bunch of pink to the palette. Like that clashes with the overall aesthetic. They found a way to let Ripley be so loving and so maternal, but at the same time, total fucking badass. Get away from her, you bitch, is as iconic a line as any you care to mention from any era, from any genre. And it's like, yeah, you want to achieve Hall of Fame status in a movie, give your protagonist, your strong female lead a line like that, and it won't come across quite as, I don't know, like this, the whole strong female lead phenomenon feels so corporate. It's like human resources idea of what a strong female lead should be. It's like, no, a strong female lead is someone who puts on that fucking suit and goes to fucking war with the queen.
One thing I was going to mention, like the suit, it's not like Starship Troopers where it's full of guns. Like they could have made like a mech suit out of anime where it's just full of weapons. It was like it's dock equipment.
Yeah,
it's a forklift.
It's a forklift.
Like Lucy talks about like
forklift with legs.
Movies. She's been away for 57 years, so it's like the only job she can get is at the space dock.
Yeah,
so that's one thing she knows how to use, and like it's great that she's an action hero, but she does it in her own way.
And I love how the queen studies her, and as the fight progresses, the queen is watching. And she starts dodging certain attacks. Like, oh, you're not just some dumb bug. You're a living, thinking creature who's analyzing.
Respond to each other. Like, the queen, when she starts snapping and Ripley turns on that little torch. And it's like just cool that the forklift even has that the power loader even has like a little welding torch.
And it all seems like technology that would work. This is not the world of Marvel where Iron Man can press a button and his suit materializes out of nothing. Like, it's like, that's a little weird. It's like the technology feels so lived in and so like it's got grease on it. It all feels so real.
I was reading the making of Iron Man 2 book the other day, and they talked about how they really put in the work to make sure that the Iron Man suit actually could fit in that briefcase, the racetrack scene where he puts it on. And like that's one of my favorite scenes in the MCU. And I was thinking like, oh, that's probably the last time they ever put that consideration of like, oh, how could this physically fit inside
Now every single superhero in the MCU, they press a button and their mask materializes. I'm like, he's fucking Ant-Man. You don't need to give him like magic. Like
mass is a real thing. I was thinking, in Terminator 2, when they Hasta La Vista Baby shoots the T-1000 to a bunch of pieces, I'm like, they should have grabbed a shovel and dumped a bunch of the T-1000 in the molten lava.
He would have come back like small Wolverine.
Yeah, he would have been small Wolverine, exactly. Because
call to John. Like, wow, you're not quite as scary anymore.
But anyway, if the first film made Sigourney Weaver a star, the second film made her an action hero, and she completely carries that as well.
And ironically, as an actress, she loathes guns. She hates guns. She doesn't even like to see guns, which makes that scene where she's killing all the eggs and you're seeing like how many rounds she's fired and the close up on her face. It's like, it is the most 80s sequence you can possibly think of.
Even before that, I love the montage of her getting ready to go into rescue Newt, where she's taping the guns together and adding the little tracker and like getting in, and then that reveal, the music, the way it builds up, and she gets off the elevator, like how cool she looks.
And that music would get reused in every single trailer for the next 20 years. Dun 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 dun.
I mean, what's hilarious is the trailer.
Is it James Horner who did that, or?
I think so. Yeah, that's going to be.
I think it's James Horner who did this. Yeah, James Horner did the music.
Which I think he didn't crack that because he was going to use a different piece and it got rejected, and he just like banged it out in like 2 nights or something like that. I think he like just kind of threw that. But
it's used twice in the movie very well, and then it got used in 1,000 trailers throughout the 90s.
The trailer for Alien 3, I remember using it. Maybe it wasn't the theatrical trailer, maybe when it was coming out on video, but I remember using the Bishop's Countdown to try to make Alien 3 look like an action-packed movie like Aliens. But yeah, you're right. Every other trailer used to have that. And well, also like talking about the structure of these films, I love how everyone has sort of a false ending. It builds to a climax where like, the Nostromo, the refinery gets blown up, or, the reactor melts down in Aliens, and you think like, okay, that's a perfectly satisfying ending. And then the Yeah, and then there's like one last kind of, all out moment where you get the real climax, and it's
Glory. I had no idea that was coming. I was 10 years old watching it on HBO, and I was like, wait a second, he's a synthetic person. He can't have an alien inside. But then it comes all the way
it's
through.
the tail, yeah.
Right?
And the way she just snaps him in half.
I fucking God. I mean, yeah, my whole world was complete. But I think what also helps this movie so much, there's little bits of humor sprinkled throughout. Like when they're first time they're entering like the area that's been kind of converted into the nest, and everybody's like, "Are you seeing this?" And like somebody asks Hudson, he's like, "Don't ask me, man. I just work here." But it's like the way he says that. Bill Paxton, it's his finest hour, and the one line I've quoted more than any other is this bad boy right here.
I guess we're not going to be leaving now, right?
I'm sorry, Newt.
You don't have to be sorry. It wasn't your fault.
That's it, man. It's game over, man. It's game over.
the
way his voice cracks, game over. Like it just
because he's so cocky when he gets introduced, and then like he breaks down, and then he kind of gets one last gets it together. That
Ripley gets in his face, going back to the idea of her being a leader. She's like we need you to solve these problems. He's like okay, you can kind of see him focusing and coming together. You're like, this is something I can do. I can't solve the whole problem, but I can solve this one small problem that she just put in front of me. And he goes to work, and he's great. So it's like, but shout out to Adam Rakoff, who from our first edition D&D campaign named his wizard after Hudson, and he named his I think it was a fighter initially. His fighter after Hicks, but the fighter ended up getting killed by a blue dragon. But Adam is a big fan of Hudson and Hicks.
I mean, they're great characters, and even the fact that like Gorman mixes them up at the beginning just to kind of show that he's not familiar with these group of people, but they have such great camaraderie between them. I really love how the movie Near Dark, the vampire movie, brought over Bill Paxton and Lance Henriksen and Jenna Goldstein, because like they just they feel like a family. Like they're so comfortable together on screen that like that movie Near Dark from the get-go, that you can just tell how familiar they are with each other. So really great cast. Weaver's great, and like I think it's not in the theatrical cut, but I always watched I remember when they came out with the special edition cut. That's what I watched on VHS.
Which I like, but it is too long. I prefer the theatrical cut.
The Newt sequence is too long, but it's got two scenes that one I think is important, which is when Ripley finds out that her daughter's passed away, because I feel like that's really kind of crucial to her emotional journey in this movie.
How long has she been in hibernation when they let her out? It's 2179 when aliens.
7 years she's been in hibernation.
57 years, yeah.
And I think like again talking about continuity, how I don't really take continuity too seriously in this movie. When I watched the first film, I don't think the whole time, oh, Ripley's a single mother out in space while her daughter's back home on Earth waiting for her. I just watched the character self-contained in that movie. But in Aliens, to me, that's like, oh, that's really important. And the fact that when she fights the queen alien at the end, they're two mothers who have lost their kids, in a way. So like that adds to that scene even in the climax. But the other scene that I really like that's in the extended cut, it's maybe not as emotionally important, but it's just a great sequence, is the sentry gun one. Because that's, to me, that's like the magic of James Cameron, where he's pulling suspense out of thin air. Like he's got absolutely nothing. He's just got like, a couple exploding alien shots and, numbers going down on the laptop screen. And he makes it into this incredibly suspenseful sequence. And to me, it just sort of shows you how great filmmaking, editing, all of that can come together to create an engaging sequence without really needing that much. I think like that's one of the best action sequences in the film, and like you see nothing. It's all just implied.
But also it's amazing how like you can just watch it as a big dumb action movie and enjoy it, or you can whip out your magnifying glass and go looking for details and also get excited. Like I think it took me, I don't know how many times I'd seen the movie before I realized it was actually due to Sigourney Weaver bringing up the spaceship that Hadley's Hope gets attacked, because like during her first presentation, like, oh, they've been there for 20 years, they're totally fine. But it's at that point where Paul Reiser's character calls him, is like, hey, y'all should go to this spot and explore and see what happens. And sure enough, like within a day, they've lost contact. But I don't think
it's not a coincidence. She is the inciting incident that leads to the colonists finding
and
the
it
ship.
just that escaped my notice from like age probably 10 to 20 before I finally was like, oh, I see now how it all comes together.
I feel like a lesser writer would just make it coincidental that they happen to find the alien after they find Ripley. But the fact
they never
that,
even bothered to show the ship. Like it's like they allow the audience to be intelligent and to put like the pieces together because they know you're going to keep coming back and watching it over and over again. But like any conventional Hollywood movie would show them going back to the ship and like
there is in the like extended cut, but I think it's fine if that stuff's cut out, especially because when you see the from the outside, it looks kind of cool. Like the way James Cameron did it is that maybe volcanic activity or something broke it, so it's like more damaged. But you have this shot where it's Newt's father and mother looking inside, and you can tell they had like no money for this, and it wasn't an important set piece for the film, so it's fine. But there's just like wires and cables and things like hanging down, which like it's not right for that kind of mysterious biomechanical ship. But I think Cameron was just such a perfect choice to kind of follow up Alien and do something really different with it. And
it's very 80s action, like eat this, like just all that kind of stuff. Like it's so simple, but it just communicates volumes. Or like at one point when Paxton says, "You're dog meat, pal," like he's about to kill Paul Reiser. Like the dialogue is fucking phenomenal. It's like the poster child for great, tough action dialogue. But I'm worried I'm taking advantage of your good nature and your good time. We've been going 2 hours and we still have a few more movies and comics to get to. So I'm going to force us to move on. As I could talk about Aliens until doomsday, but check out the Hall of Fame documentary about the making of. You will absolutely love it. But next on the chronology is an unusual one because in 1990, there was a comic that I've actually read, Aliens Earth War 1 to 4, which gets kind of wiped out of existence by Alien 3, but it's contained in this volume. But I made a little video clip out of some of Sam Keith's art, which is right here. So if anybody wants to see what happens with Newt and Hicks and Ripley if Alien 3 had never happened, Aliens Earth War gives you an alternative, and I think it's worth a read just because Sam Keith's art is so gorgeous and such eye candy. It'll suck you right in.
I really love Sam Keith. He's probably most famous for doing the Max, but I love how he's not somebody who is hung up on realistic proportions. He just does things
incredibly expressive
in whatever's the most expressive way, and it's really striking art, and it's really cool. I also want to bring up, there's recently, I haven't liked most of the new Marvel Aliens comics. I think, for Dark Horse, it was like a high priority.
I'm shocked to find out the comic book industry is putting out subpar product in the modern era.
Well, especially like a lot of it is clearly like referenced from, I'm like, is that just like a traced action figure photo? I think I have that action figure. There's stuff like that where, probably the most notorious one was that Obi-Wan Kenobi series adaptation where it was like just badly traced art from the TV show. But some of the Marvel stuff
the TV show sucked to begin with. Why would you want to trace anything from it? So
but I think like the comic book industry, people don't always have time or get paid enough, and like especially going from Dark Horse where the license was like a big deal to Marvel where it's like not a big deal.
Also, what Dark Horse will do is if you're Dark Horse, or if you're not DC or Marvel and it's the late 80s or early 90s, you have to offer something that you cannot find in the pages of the big two. So going all in on the horror genre where you can show things like it's hard. It's so hard to do the horror genre in comic book form, but every once in a while you get like when Alan Moore was doing Swamp Thing, every once in a while I'd give you an issue like this is scary as fucking shit. And the art was a huge part of that. Sam Keith is a natural for this kind of storytelling.
Well, but one Marvel one that's really recent that's just wrapped up that I actually liked was the Aliens What If Burke Survived comic series, which is written by Paul Reiser himself, who played Carter Burke. And I don't know if I should spoil it for people, but
how do they, because we don't see him die, but it's implied very heavily in Aliens. What was the explanation for his survival in the comic?
It's not super important to the comic. Basically, he just like gets shaken loose, I think, and gets away after the alien takes him off to be cocooned. But the kind of like, oh shit moment for me was, you know, he manages to sneak back aboard the Sulaco, the spaceship, and he's in this comic book anyway, he's responsible for bringing the egg and setting the fire
that starts.
So it's like, you know, it's a what if comic book, and you're reading it, oh, like, okay, what if, and then it plays out like, oh, this doesn't actually contradict the continuity. Maybe the what if is what happens. So,
what if out of the title, yeah.
You know, and then like there's something like really funny about, you know, 35 years later, and it's Carter Burke just like living a normal life on Earth, like brushing his teeth, going to his job. So I was actually really kind of taken aback by it, and I dug that a lot. If you care about the Carter Burke character, maybe you should check it out. I don't know, but
I need a Carter Burke shared universe. All right, well, let's push into the movies that I have a feeling you're going to have unusual takes, because no one likes 90s sci-fi more than Martin Kessler. And I saw these movies in the theater. I actually saw Alien Resurrection twice, but Alien 3, I think I was in like summer after either 7th or 8th grade when it came out. It's the summer of 1992 or fall of 1992. You know, I was like 15 years old when this bad boy comes out, but it takes place in the, once again, this is up for debate, in theory, right around the time of 2179. So I had Dean Martin. I was like, how long are they asleep between Aliens and Alien 3? Because everyone says 2179. To me, it feels like they're asleep for longer. But well, when does this story take place? Let's give us the lowdown.
I mean, it's ambiguous how long they're in hypersleep, so you could have some leeway if it's more time or less time. To me, the fact that you know, they were on course to head back to Earth, it only seemed to take them a couple weeks to get to LV-426 and Aliens. It's probably going to take them a couple weeks to get back to the Earth. You know, so they're in hypersleep maybe for a few weeks, maybe even less, because, you know, the alien egg's there, and you know, aliens running around, gonna find them. You know, it's not gonna wait for forever. You know, the facehugger, I think, like, it's.
You hadn't read that What If comic. What's your explanation for how the aliens got on board this shuttle? Because for me, at the end of Aliens, it seems like the aliens are fucking toast, and yet somehow they need a sequel, so they have to have an explanation.
So there's two schools of thought on this. One is that the Queen Alien manages to smuggle an egg aboard the drop ship when she sneaks in the landing gear. You know, that she also laid an egg in there somehow. Maybe she had, you know, one left in the chamber.
Okay, fair. I don't buy it, but it's plausible.
You know, because her whole like egg-laying sack thing gets ripped.
Came off. Yeah,
comes off. But who knows? Maybe she can.
Maybe she had one right in that, like, just right in the sphincter that was kind of like not quite fully out. That was
just
like
groundhogging it. Just
it was touching cotton and it pops out.
So that's one thought about how that could have happened. The other is that maybe Bishop actually snuck the egg on board because, you know, maybe that's what he was doing.
Further analysis.
Yeah, because he, you know, maybe he's got some subroutine that they're not privy to. You know,
but he's always studying them. Like anytime, like everybody's like, "What are you up to?" He's like, "Well, I'm going to go continue my analysis." And Ripley's like,
climax of Aliens,
Bishop, like,
he's
whatever.
like, you know, Bishop, goddamn you. You know, maybe that's what he's doing. Maybe he brought it to the ship and came back and picked her up. You know,
I have too much love and affection for Bishop to think along those lines, but I guess I don't buy either of those two prevalent theories. But the reality is,
the real answer
they needed a sequel, and so the aliens.
I mean, that's you know, that even kind of comes from. I mean, that's in Vincent Ward's script also, which he was going to do the wooden planet with the monks, which I think would have been really cool. It's like Alien by way of Hard to Be a God. I would have loved that, but I think like that script. Instead of fixing a couple issues that they had with that script, they were like, oh, let's get rid of the setting and all the interesting stuff and put it on a prison. And they still kind of brought over a lot of the problems that were in that script. To me, it's like, like, you know, we got to get this delicious bathwater. Let's just throw the baby out of it, you know. But, you know, there's a couple issues I think the film has. But I love Alien 3, actually. Like, I think...
And this is David Fincher before Seven. This is David Fincher before Zodiac. It's David Fincher before any of his famous movies. At this point, he's done a bunch of Madonna videos, like Vogue, like, you know, the black and white.
He was a hot shot. Like those, I mean, those music videos were a big deal. He was like a hot commodity. People kind of think he was unknown at that time. He wasn't. He was like,
He's
like a Chris
superstar
Cunningham
music video
or
director.
Spike Jones. He's like one of those guys.
Yeah,
where
Michael Bay, all these guys came
Yeah.
out of music videos.
So he, but I think when they, when David Giler and Walter Hill picked him, I think they thought he was going to be just like a visual guy who would make the film look good and work fast, and he wasn't. They didn't realize he was going to be very meticulous with the takes.
Yeah, he's a total perfectionist.
So that created a lot of friction on set where, David Fincher's talked a little bit about how they set out to make a release date instead of making a movie. And, there was a lot of
imagine if he'd made Seven first, then Alien 3, how much more leeway instead of making The Game, which I do not like, if he'd made Alien 3 then instead, wow, he would have had so much freedom.
Maybe.
at least he would have had a hit under his belt to justify his decisions. And
I'm not sure they realized if, Michael Biehn has that story about not wanting to lend out his likeness for Alien 3 because he gets killed off. And, eventually he got paid as much as he did to do Aliens for like the little screenshot. But he's like, well, if I knew David Fincher was going to be David Fincher, I would have said, here, you can have it. Just put me in one of your movies later.
Sigourney Weaver knew he was going to be legit. She had a movie called Copycat, which came out at the same time as Seven. And she warned everybody. She said, look, I know you don't know who he is, but David Fincher did Alien 3. He's very talented. He's got this movie called Seven coming out at the same time as Copycat. Maybe we should move our release date. Like, David Fincher's a joke. Nobody cares about Seven. Then, of course, Seven obliterated Copycat. But Sigourney Weaver saw that massive bullet coming, which torpedoed her movie.
And I think like the big issue that people bring up with Alien 3, that fans bring up with Alien 3 is that it kills off Hicks and Newt. People don't seem to like that, but for me that was never like an issue with the movie. I think like part of the issue is that you don't always get to know all those characters, that it's a little bit too compressed. I think the extended
Charles
cut,
Dance is good.
Charles Sutton's good.
My main problem is that it feels just so much smaller than Aliens. Aliens felt like a big giant canvas.
Well, I actually like that about it because I actually think there are too many characters in Alien 3 is part of the problem, because you get some of these prisoners who it's like, wait, who's that guy supposed to be?
Yeah, you got another bald guy.
Yeah, I think
like a video featuring two bald guys.
Well, but
we would have been great extras in Alien 3.
How many characters did they say there are? Like how many prisoners? 20?
Well, I can't remember.
20 something. It should have been closer to. It should have been like a little bit of a smaller cast, I think. Like get rid of some of those prisoners who were basically just background extras. I think bring it down to like maybe like 15, 16 guys. It's a little bit more manageable. And again, the assembly cut is a little bit better because like you have the whole middle section which got gutted out of the film. But there's also things I like about the theatrical cut, like the fact that it's a dog instead of an ox. Or
speaking of the dog, here we go.
That's probably the most iconic shot in the franchise, the alien right up there.
Every trailer, every poster, every bit of marketing, it was all that.
It's funny.
There's scenes that I like.
But when the film came out on VHS, it was pan and scan. So I never got that iconic shot until like I got the little the Alien anthology set later on. But for me, it was broken up into two shots. Where
gotcha. Oh, interesting.
So I never saw it. I knew that
Alien and then cut to Ripley's reaction.
Yeah, right. I think Ripley's reaction, then like it cuts to the they fake.
When I saw it in the theater,
Yeah.
Years went by before I watched it again in its entirety. I'd catch like little bits and pieces on HBO, but from 91 to 99, I wasn't necessarily watching a lot of stuff like on cable or at home. I was like, from 91 to 95, I was in boarding school. So I'd see some stuff in the theater on vacation. But then in college from 95 to 99, I was like a total movie snob, like watching old movies and like Laserdisc, blah, blah, blah. But Alien 3, it was beneath me to watch it in the late 90s because I was such a pretentious little fucker. But so I don't think I've ever seen the pan and scan version in its entirety.
But it's a film that does not translate very well to VHS. Like I think Aliens does. It's a more narrow aspect ratio.
It is.
It's
125 to 1.
I think that film I watched a lot on VHS. Alien 3, Alien Cubed, it's like oh, this movie is almost unwatchable. Like, especially trying to tell some of the people apart and the way it's
Why did they write it the way? Why did they write it as Alien Cubed?
I don't know. This is
because I was in math. I was still taking math classes at the time, and I was learning what it means when you've like something squared or cubed.
I guess somebody thought it looked science fiction-y. I don't know. It's even the fact that it's got like a 3 in the title. I know Vincent Ward's version, it was going to be 3 like Roman numerals, which
okay.
But I think like the fact that you go aliens, the third one shouldn't have a number in the title. It should be something more creative. It's got to be alien something or, I mean, now we're kind of in this pattern of like Alien Covenant, Alien Romulus. Maybe it should have had the title like that because it's like a weird, awkward. It's the only one in the original 4 that's got a number in the title.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it doesn't completely work, but it's got great bits. And as you mentioned before, I love how the first 4 movies, they're all wildly different stylistic departures from what came before. You're getting very stylistically distinctive directors doing their own take. I think it's well worth seeing. Mm-hmm. And this is going to sound ridiculous, but I think I like Alien Resurrection more just because it's it feels more almost like Blade 2 as opposed to like an Alien movie.
No, I think you're spot on.
Yeah, and so
I mean, Alien 3, out of the first 4, Alien 3 is the one that I watched the least. But I do love it. Like, sometimes I'm in the mood to watch something that feels kind of depressing and morose and obsessed with death. And, I think, like, people call it nihilistic. I don't think it actually is a nihilistic film. Maybe Alien Covenant's nihilistic. But for me, Alien 3, it's all about, finding meaning and, the meaning of losing people and the way life kind of crashes into you and dealing with.
She looks great with a shaved head. Yeah. Not everybody looks good with a shaved head.
Yeah, she looks great with it. That's what? Alien 3 might be the best she looks out of these movies. I might be a fan of her look in Alien 3 most of all, but she also still gets the action hero moments at the end. I love when she.
All right, so you gave me a scene, the improvising scene. Tee up the improvising scene that you sent me.
Well, this is when they've already had one plan go completely awry, which is something I like in films whenever characters plan something and then it just falls apart. So this is the second attempt to trap the alien. They're going to try to trap it in the lead works and kill it with molten lead, but the plan's just falling apart. And she just has such a great reaction seeing it all kind of go to pieces.
All right, well, here it is in 3, 2, 1.
What are we doing?
Improvising.
We're improvising. Great.
I was thinking, you hear the behind the scenes stories about how much the production of the film was kind of a mess. And I just picture like David Fincher doing the same kind of like, oh, we're improvising thing.
What are we shooting today? We're improvising.
But no, I actually really like Alien 3. I think it's flawed compared to the first 2, but
and I like all the POV shots from the alien, since it is a dog, like running up on walls and like chasing them. And
that is great. I wish they used just that and cut out the kind of rod puppet matted in, because that looks terrible.
Yeah, the when you see the stuff that's matted in, it's such a different consistency in its color from the rest of what surrounds it. It just kind of like your eye rejects it. The only time the alien looks really good is in those extreme close-ups.
There's a fan edit of the film that I've seen people working on, which kind of is a composite of the assembly cut and the theatrical cut. But one thing they're trying to do is fix the matted in effects. And I've seen they've been using like I think an action figure and stop motion animation, and they're matting it in a way and digitally like altering it frame by frame. And I'm like, this actually looks pretty good. I'm really impressed with like the creativity.
It's so much effort for it's ultimately kind of, I wouldn't say an inconsequential movie, but I feel like if you're going to put all that time and energy into something, like put it into Vertigo or Citizen Kane or Doctor Strange, Alien 3.
That's the stuff you want to mess around with. Why mess with perfection?
I guess Nightbreed and Alien 3 are part of that, like that family tree of films.
I love fan edits, especially people trying to like fix things or create their own versions of things. I think it's really cool. And I don't want to watch a fan edit of Citizen Kane. I'm like, what are you doing? But a fan edit of Alien 3, I'll absolutely watch that.
What is out there that is screaming for a fan edit, like a movie that needs to be salvaged or fixed?
A fan edit, I would say there's already a couple out there, but I think the best fan edit of David Lynch's Dune hasn't been made yet, especially since they're still finding footage of stuff that's been cut out. I've seen people restoring certain scenes. I think there's going to be like a definitive fan edit someday of people who kind of painstakingly collect footage and edit it. You know, people talk about the Spice Diver edit? That's probably the most popular one, but I think like, you know, that one works okay if you just want to see some of the footage.
It works if you just want information, but what it lacks is the stylistic impact. Like when you see the opening credits, I want to see the credits and hear that music blasting like a motherfucker. Don't interfere with the stuff that really works in the original movie.
So I think sooner or later somebody's going to come along with you know, the definitive fan edit of David Lynch's Dune, maybe.
Well, as long as they let what the hell's her fucking name? Saint, was it Alia? I was kept thinking Lisa, but as long as they keep Saint Alia the Knife's voice, how can this be? Then I will be totally fine.
He is the Quasar.
Exactly. So moving on from Alien Cube, before we get to Alien Resurrection, we have a comic which you put on my radar, which I ordered and added to my physical library collection. Alien Dead Orbit, and I've got the a little shot here. So this came out in 2017, but it takes place in 2295. Make the pitch.
It's back to basics. Alien on a spaceship. Great art. Great horror. It's one of the best Alien comics out there. Like, I think, you know, people talk about the great Alien comic books. They might bring up Alien Labyrinth. But I think like Dead Orbit, it's right up there with the best of the 90s Dark Horse comics. It's kind of a late Dark Horse one, but it's, you know, it stands up there with, you know, a lot of the 90s stuff that kind of kept the franchise going when it felt like it needed some extra steam, you know. And if you're into these, sometimes the comics keep it alive more than the films do. I think, you know, same for Star Wars, or same for a couple other franchises where, you know, there's been these moments in time where
the side stuff is almost better than what comes after. Like I just started listening to Heir to the Empire, the book on tape for the Star Wars book, which has like music and sound effects, and the actor is pretty good at like approximating the different characters. I'm like, this is wildly entertaining to listen to.
I've got
so much more so than any movie that's followed.
I've got my Heir to the Empire up there next to She-Hulk on that shelf.
Like, why didn't they just make that into a fucking movie? It blows my goddamn mind. But anyway,
not to get too sidetracked, but like, you know, when they were talking about making the new Star Wars movies, they're like, well, it's not like we have source material to draw on. And I'm like, wait, you do. You got comics, you got books.
And best-selling novels, like novels that sold well.
You know, maybe it shouldn't have been like a direct adaptation, but you look at the Marvel movies, how successful they were at kind of cherry-picking elements from the comics.
Yeah, like Civil War is not a one-to-one adaptation, but it's more or less the concept of Civil War.
I think if they did that, maybe with the Star Wars comics and books, kind of incorporating, you know, take what works, adapt it, and use stuff that already works, I think that would have gone over probably much better. But I was actually I did watch the first couple episodes of Ahsoka, and I kind of gave
the
up.
First 2 episodes, and then I bailed.
I think so. Maybe I think like I might have bailed halfway through the third episode.
So slow.
It was boring, but also, you know, hearing people talk about, oh, Thrawn's in this live action Thrawn, and like. I kind of gave up on it partly because I didn't want to see a bad version of Thrawn. I didn't want to see him, you know, written to be not smart, or, you know, I didn't want Thrawn to be like, you know, Claw from Inspector Gadget being like, I'll get you next time, Chopper, the robot.
Well, you're echoing my feelings of Strange New Worlds and how they handle Spock and Kirk. I'm like, stop writing words for Kirk. You're not good enough. Leave Kirk alone. Leave Kirk out of this shit. The same thing with Thrawn. I like the way Thrawn is written in Heir to the Empire quite a bit. Very cool villain.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, Alien Dead Orbit, I think like out of the Dark Horse stuff, eventually they kind of waned a little bit, and like some of the better Dark Horse comics were actually imagining things from the films that never got made. Like that, you know, they did you know, what if this version of Alien 3 got made, or what if the original script for Alien got made? They were doing stuff like that a little bit, but like for me, Dead Orbit was sort of the breath of fresh air. And I almost never do this. I like the comics so much. I ended up, I went through the whole thing issue by issue, and I ended up getting the trade paperback just because I liked it so much and I wanted to have it kind of all together. Which is not something that I usually do with comics. If I've got it once, I'll just keep it once.
Yeah.
But
speaking from recent experience, take a fistful of edibles, get in the bathtub, and dig in. You will love it.
And the artist, writer James Stokoe, I think is how you pronounce it. I've never heard it, but he also did, I think, the 2 best Godzilla comics ever made. He did Godzilla in Hell, where Godzilla goes to hell, raises some hell. It's great. And he did Godzilla: The Half-Century War. So he's somebody who's been on my radar since then. And I really like his stuff. But yeah.
All right. Well, we've come to the end of our timeline. And we have one final story which takes place in 2381.
Well, before we
get there, you got another stop. Lay it on me.
Well, I just want to say about the timeline. One reason I think the timeline on the website that you're referencing might be incorrect is because in Alien 3, Charles Dance says, well, there hasn't been a case of cholera in 200 years, which for me puts the film about 200 years in the future, because we still have cholera cases right now, kind of. It's almost kind of stamped out, but not quite. And, the first Alien film is 57 years before Aliens, Alien 3. There were, Aliens and Alien 3 presumably take place close together. So I think if you work backwards, you can kind of fill in the timeline. So I think for me, the timeline that they give is a little bit off from.
So when should Resurrection take place?
400 years after cholera.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, then it's the last story.
Yeah, it's about 400 years from now. I think, like, for me, I forget if I put an exact date on it, but I figured it's probably like early 25th century. It's probably the same time period as Picard season 3.
Okay, now you're teeing up yet another crossover that Dark Horse can do. So Alien Resurrection, when this bad boy came out, City of Lost Children and Delicatessen had been interesting kind of art house successes, making this director a very unusual choice. But I saw it with my buddies in the theater, and then I liked it so much, I went with my sister, and she had a blast too. It was actually, I mean, at the time, I thought it was a pretty cool alien flick, even though it's got plenty of stuff now which I find to be a little funky. But you, as somebody who is a confirmed 90s sci-fi junkie, what are the qualities that you find interesting all these years later?
I like the look of it. I like how weird it gets, clones and half crossbreed alien human things. I like the character actors, the cast. You get people like Ron Perlman and Dominic Pion and Winona Ryder, interesting people in there. And I like that it's kind of it's the epilogue to the trilogy, the Alien first 3 films. It's sort of the life and death of Ripley, and this is her afterlife. And I like that she gets some modicum of peace at the very end of this kind of the Ripley clone living and getting to Earth. So I think it's got some issues. It's got a bad screenplay. Like, I think there's no way to get around it.
Joss Whedon. This is before Buffy, before Avengers, before Firefly, before any of that. But Joss Whedon was the writer.
Joss Whedon, he's got a bad habit of, like, anytime his writing kind of comes across bad on screen, is like, well, you didn't say it right. It's everybody's fault but mine. I'm like, you wrote the when a toad gets hit by lightning line. Like, shut up.
Yeah. You know what happens when a toad gets hit by lightning? Same thing as everything else.
So, I think.
So, quick question on alien lore: is the whole reason that they keep trying to clone her because they have the blood sample from Alien 3? I'm assuming that at the end of Aliens, when they basically nuked that site from space, that they were successful in eradicating every last remnant of the aliens on that planet.
Yeah.
And so basically, then their only option would be find out where that ship came from, or just let the aliens go forever.
I guess so.
And I like the idea that it seems like we're at the end of a long process where through multiple iterations, they've tried and failed multiple times, which actually my favorite scene of the movie is this little clip right here. And there's a little bit of nudity involved. So I hope YouTube won't strike me down with their lightning bolts.
That's a great scene.
Yeah, and I'm going to contradict what you said earlier when you said she looks the hottest in Alien 3. I think she actually might be the hottest in Alien Resurrection. That basketball
you
scene.
convinced me.
And Alien Resurrection, she's got muscles in this because she's like super strong because of like she's got a little bit of alien in her.
Yeah.
But when she's playing basketball and like dunking it and throwing it over her shoulder, she's very athletic. And for an actress who's no longer young, I think Sigourney Weaver plays it to the hilt very successfully.
There's those scenes she has early on with Winona Ryder where there's like almost something a little bit sexual hinted at between them. There's like some tension, and I'm like Weaver's hot.
She's hot in Ghostbusters. She's hot in Aliens. Like I said, unconventionally beautiful, but striking.
Yeah.
I think, she's 20 years of greatness.
Yeah. And I like her performance in this. It's something a little bit different from the Ripley you've seen before. She's got some of those alien mannerisms, and there's something a little bit mysterious in her performance. I like that idea that, the aliens got a little bit of human DNA in it at this point, and she's got a little bit of the alien DNA. And it's sort of this long process that they've got mostly right by this iteration of the clones, but not 100% perfect. So
it makes sense that after all these years of dealing with aliens and fighting the aliens, that she basically would be almost more at home among them than she is amongst humans.
Yeah. So it just adds kind of a different element to it, which I like that. And that seems like maybe the main reason why Sigourney Weaver was game to do it one more time. It's like, well, I'm not doing the exact same performance yet again. I'm doing something.
I'm sure they cut her a sizable check.
I'm sure that helps. But Sigourney Weaver, the way she talked about like Alien 3, or even Aliens, like I think she's also somebody who had enough integrity that she wouldn't have done it if she didn't think it was right. And I think that's why she got that kind of producing role on Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection, is to kind of make sure that, that the character was done properly, that, even if everything else kind of goes off the rails in these movies, that like at least how that character was handled would be correct. I think she was sort of instrumental in making sure of that. But Resurrection, it's also to me the one that feels most like, I talked about Alien versus Predator being like a comic book movie. I think Alien Resurrection feels even more like a comic book movie. Like you kind of compared it to Blade 2. It's got that, like, to me, it feels like reading just a random issue of Heavy Metal magazine. You get these like weird sort of sci-fi stories, and
you get to see the aliens swim and that sort of thing. And the gang is interesting. You have a guy in a wheelchair with like weapons hidden around. Like it definitely we're venturing into superhero adjacent territory when it comes to the
Ripley's
team.
Got these abilities which are sort of superhero like. She's got the acid for blood. That's very kind of comic book superhero kind of a element. And even the way that Jean-Pierre Jeunet shoots the film with the wide angles a little bit close up, it gives people that kind of caricature quality to their faces. Ron Perlman, people like that up close with the wide angle lens. It looks kind of cartoony, comic booky. Also the cinematographer, I think it's Darius Khondji, right? Who's like Fincher's go-to guy. So the film actually looks a lot like Seven. It looks more like David Fincher's other films than Alien 3 looks like.
And the aliens look great. I think the aliens look 1,000 times better than an Alien 3. Like the technology has changed in that period, but the aliens look fantastic.
Yeah, the CG actually holds up really well. Like the swimming scenes, I'm always really impressed how, all this time's gone by, it still looks really good.
It's like Starship Troopers. It still looks great.
I think it's a shame that if Alien 3 got made, if they said, the production's a mess, let's just put it on pause and finish it in a year, or, let's work to get the script right and then make it in a year. Jurassic Park would have come out. The special effects for Alien 3 probably would have been completely different.
Yeah, but a sea change. All right, well, we got to talk about my one major complaint about this, because you sent a clip involving it. So before we address it, let's show the clip you titled Bad Baby. So I don't like it when the movies change the reproductive cycle of the aliens. I think it's so perfect in the first movie. When you start adding variations, like with the Predalien and things like that, that's when you lose me. So make the case. What's going on with the Bad Baby?
I'd say it's not exactly the alien's life cycle. It's a weird bastardized clone alien having a messed up human reproductive cycle. It's more like how Jurassic Park, we call them dinosaurs. Those aren't really dinosaurs. They're like weird clone things that have frog DNA stuck in them. They're constructed. You know, I would justify it by saying the aliens in Alien Resurrection are not the same aliens that you see in the first 3 films. They're you know, they're an abomination.
Yeah. But they're smart. The scene where
Yeah.
one sacrifices itself to create enough acid so the others
Yeah.
can break out. Like they think like a hive, not as individuals. And what's good for all of them is just a matter of who's going to take the bullet and let themselves get ripped apart to create that hatch. I was like, that's fucking cool, because aliens would think as a group or as a collective as opposed to individuals.
Yeah. I would say another comic just to mention is Alien Labyrinth, which, you know, you get this one element of the story, which is humans doing all these weird experiments on the alien. And then you see what the aliens do to people in the hives. And it's almost like the inverse where, you know, the aliens are kind of experimenting on humans, the ways that they're like pitting them up and what they're doing to them. So I feel like Alien Resurrection has a little bit of that. I know there was some kind of genetic manipulation stuff in David Twohy's prison script for Alien 3, which kind of got morphed with the Vincent Ward script for the Wooden Planet version of Alien 3. So like that's where I think a lot of the kind of genetic engineering, science gone amok stuff comes from. But the newborn alien, I know it gets a bad rap. I just think it's an amazing creature. Like I think the way it looks, how real it feels, and the kind of blending of something that's a little bit more sympathetic with the alien is just something different that the series hadn't done before. So I get why people might not like it, because it's like a take it or leave it sort of deal. But you know,
I like its death scene where it basically like through a tiny hole gets all of its guts sucked out. It's like, that's kind of creative.
That's so cool. But you know, like I think at that point in the Alien franchise, there was this sort of idea that, hey, we got to add something new. We can't just do the same thing again. And it almost felt like the last thing you could do is really just, you know, what happens when you mix the alien and the human.
Which is probably going to be the problem in Alien Romulus, where there's not going to be a single ingredient that is new. Like anytime you do something new, people are like, oh, well, that's not aliens. Which once again, I want to say, this is why we need new franchises, because sometimes a franchise is just played out.
Would you, the newborn alien, would you love it if it was a completely different, unrelated science fiction movie called, you know, the baby monster from Planet Goo-Goo? Like
exactly. Like I will accept just about anything. And it's just like, yeah, at a certain point, franchises have just they've said what they want to say. They've done their thing. Like if you just left Alien and Aliens as is and never done another thing with it, you know, it's still regarded as like two of the best movies ever. But it's like, I don't know, I just feel like so many of these franchises overstayed their welcome, and it's that weird kind of like venture capitalist attitude where it's like they look at these IPs or stories as like stocks, and the stocks are in decline or they're on the rise. And it's like, you know, once a stock bottoms out, that brings in the buyers who want to get the bargains and try to like, you know, like resurrect. And the same with these properties reach like their natural nadir. And so it's like, ooh, now I can get it for cheap and try to dust it off and make it live and breathe again. It's like, well, for the same amount of money, you could develop 5 or 10 more original scripts and maybe have, you know, hit the mother load. And so I want people to think
every
long
couple
term.
of years they come up with a new Terminator film where somebody promises that like, oh, it's going to be the start of a new trilogy.
Yeah,
and
Netflix has got the animated series.
Yeah.
Netflix has got a new series coming at the end of August for Terminator. And it's like, when you look at Terminator Salvation, Genesis, and I think Dark Fate, that was like, you could have made a new trilogy if you had a long-term think, but instead you have like 3 one-offs that are all equally shitty in my eyes. And I'm just like, anyway, don't make any more Terminator movies. Make new, cool, kick-ass Terminator adjacent kind of concepts that are inspired by Terminator, but can be their own thing. But we so rarely get new franchises like Rebel Moon. No matter how much I might have shit on it in the last 24 hours, gleefully and justifiably, at least it was new. Like it was supposed to be a Star Wars pitch originally. They turned it into Rebel Moon. Rebel Moon sucks, but I will give them a high five for attempting to give us a new sci-fi fantasy franchise, even if it was a total abomination.
Well, that's
Martin,
something.
I'm putting all my faith in you. I feel like you have such a brain for sci-fi and for fantasy and such like a natural instinct. When are you going to write a comic or make a short film? Like you sent me that short film. I don't know when it takes place in the timeline, but that short film for Alien, the animated one, Monday.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah.
It's like, when are you going to give us your Alien Monday or something that's like, you know, a totally original creation by Martin Kessler?
I mean, I'm always working on stuff. I don't know when something might materialize. I mean, if they give me a pile of money, I'll make it tomorrow. But, you know, I've got original ideas. And
I want you to write a sci-fi comic and we'll crowdfund the fuck out of that. We know enough people now in the world of podcasting and YouTube channels and social media where we could raise you 20 grand, where you and an artist could give us some cool. But that's my dream for Martin Kessler in the short term is either a short animated movie or a comic that's totally your own baby, and you give birth to something new. And if people like it, make it into a feature.
What I was watching lately was the, in some of the Studio Ghibli movies, they've got the film all just in storyboard form with the audio. Sometimes it's like more interesting to watch than I won't say than the films themselves, because the animation is like breathtaking, but I kind of like that format of just seeing a bunch of still images and hearing the audio over top. And
totally, it could be like audio fiction that's accompanied by storyboards.
Yeah. I think something like that would be pretty cool to make and wouldn't need too many resources.
Yeah, but just we know enough people now with big enough followings where we could easily scrape together the money to make it worth your while. So that, like I was joking earlier, or not joking, but saying like suggesting you create a YouTube channel. Perhaps a better use of your time and energy would just be writing a kick-ass, fucked up 90s era comic book, but it's your own, like 90s in flavor, but your own original creation.
Okay, I can do that.
All righty. Well, what else do we want to talk about before we wrap this up? I originally said we're going to record for an hour and a half, and we've gone for 2 hours and 40 minutes. You've been very generous with your time. Any final thoughts or words on this giant timeline of several hundred years worth of science fiction that we've explored today?
I mean, the Alien franchise, it's the ultimate survivor. You can't kill it. It's just going to keep coming back. It's so, especially
since Disney owns it now. For the next 100 years, every couple of years, there'll be an alien something.
Yeah.
Like Ryan Reynolds jokes to Hugh Jackman and Deadpool. It's like, they're going to make you play it till you're 90. And then like later on, he's like, till you're 90. Yeah. Once again, until Alien is 90, Disney will continue to drag it out and try to beat some life out of it.
I mean, I've heard a couple of rumors about what might be going on Alien Romulus. I don't know if you want to talk about that at all, or just kind of cross your fingers and hope for the best that the movie turns out.
I mean, I'm going to see it in any movie I pay to see. I hope it'll be good. But it sounds like you have information to the contrary.
I might. maybe I'll tell you off air.
We'll do big giant spoiler warning. If you don't want to hear anything about the movie, like inside knowledge, bail out now. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to like, favorite, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. But I cannot wait. Give me the juice.
Well, one thing I've heard is that the main alien in the movie, might actually be the alien from the first film. Yeah.
Lame as fuck. How did they make that happen?
That it went into like like tardigrades when they can survive in a vacuum, that the alien formed like a little, almost like a shell around itself, and it was just pulled along on the little escape ship, and then somebody picked it up and found it, and that's why Ripley was off course for 57 years. And there's also some rumors that like maybe they were working on like a CGI deep fake Ian Holm for the movie and stuff like that, where I'm like, ugh, I don't know if I want to see some of that stuff. But
well, now you're lowering my expectations, or maybe I'll be happily surprised by the movie, because now I'm expecting the worst. So
I'm expecting it's going to be competent, but I don't really want all the continuity tying into the first movie or anything like that. I would rather have the films, if you're going to keep making alien films, I would rather have them be like the comics. I would rather have stuff like Dead Orbit that feels very self-contained and well-constructed and just has an interesting artistic point of view. I think if you're going to go down that route, I think you're probably going to have more success than keep coming back to trying to tie
No, Disney's don't need to turn it into Star Wars or Marvel, where it's all big shared universe. So like Star Wars, like the death of it right now is that they keep jumping around the timeline. Like, either tell us what happens at the end of the timeline,
anytime they have
leave it alone.
A modicum of success, they try to build stuff off of it. Like the Baby Yoda show. I'm like, that first season was really kind of refreshing and self-contained and low key.
I love how you call it the Baby Yoda show, which is basically what it is.
It is the Baby Yoda show. I mean, what his name's Baby Yoda. Why call it anything else?
Yeah.
And that. But everybody liked the Baby Yoda show, and it just felt like this little thing that wasn't connected to anything bigger. It was just like a little self-contained story, and it was very likable. And season 2, they're like, oh, how can we spin this off into a million things? And it just fell apart from there, and how can we tie this back to, bring in Luke Skywalker, bring in Boba Fett, bring in Clone Wars, it just went off the rails. So, anytime you have something that actually feels kind of refreshingly self-contained, it's like, how do we build a shared universe out of this?
Disney looks at everything like a multiverse. And I think audiences, while Deadpool's making all the money that you can possibly make, I think we have reached a saturation point on multiverse storylines, and it's time to bring things back in.
The Deadpool and Wolverine movie was like the break glass in case of emergency.
Totally.
Kind of a franchise thing where it's like,
we're fucked. Get Hugh Jackman back in the suit. That's the only thing that can save us.
And I was like, oh, well, this is going to be like the nadir. Like, it's going to make $1 billion, but also like there's no going back after this. And then I feel like they really doubled down on that by bringing in Robert Downey Jr. back.
I think bringing back Hugh and bringing back Robert Downey Jr. is the ultimate admission that the last 5 years have been a complete and total failure for the MCU. Like, fuck, none of these characters are popular.
Yeah,
we got to go back to what works.
At least Robert Downey Jr.'s playing a different character.
Yeah, kind of. We don't know. I mean, maybe he's a variant.
I hate the whole like variant.
And maybe the end of Secret Wars is Robert Downey Jr. versus Robert Downey Jr. playing two parts. Like, I mean, it could be anything. We really don't know. But now we're talking about Marvel.
The heartbreaking thing is that like Robert Downey Jr. is great, and it's well, whatever.
We'll save that. We'll table that for a later date. You've already been more than generous with your time. Where can people find your latest podcast with the Pink Smoke? Where can people find you online? And where can people expect to see your future comic book that I'm going to guilt trip you into writing?
Best place to find everything I do is over on Twitter. I'm at Movie Kessler. And I've got a recent podcast episode on all the different Peter Pan films. I have one coming up soon about Queen of Spades, the Thurl Dickinson 1940s film based on the Pushkin short story. I've got one I'm supposed to be recording in like 2 hours from now about
whoever you're recording with. I apologize because whenever I record a long podcast, I'm narcoleptic afterwards. I get really tired. You're gonna need to chug some Jolt Cola or start some trucker speed.
I was gonna fit the movie watched again. It's a classic film noir movie I'm going to be talking about with Felicia Marone. So
nice. Tell her I said hello. We recorded a podcast like 1.5 years ago. She rocks.
Yeah, she's really cool. She's got her own podcast now. So
very cool podcast and voice. Very the opposite of mine. She's very calm and kind of soothing to listen to. I'm like, but she's like the master of like the calm, controlled voice, speaking very smoothly.
So check out my Twitter. People can look forward to that stuff, and feel free to tweet at me about Alien anything. I've got opinions about everything. So that's great. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much. And I guess we'll save it for later whether or not you would ever consider having sex with an alien if backed into a corner. Like, does your love of the franchise extend to that point? But I guess we
you don't even have to back me into the corner. But
and on that note, we're going to bring the sucker in for a safe landing. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, hunt me down on social media. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back at you with more Alien content in a few short weeks when I review Romulus. But thank you to Kessler. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.
It ain't like it used to be, but it'll do.
You know how to whistle, don't you, Steve? You just put your lips together and blow.